There's a Pokemon. Nirvana says, no HR low lasers. The 100 Metashock says, Pokemon Snap plus Spider-Man. Klitka has left channel Smagoth. Kairoski on Let's Play says, don't do it when you drive. If you get to a drive-thru and you open up, they use their radio to call the cops. Then it's another trip to the station, and the cop calls US, and other stuff. Kairoski says, that's why you should always get out of the car at fast food. If Artie smells your car and it's Wendy's or Taco from yesterday, they might call in anyway. They like loyalty. Kairoski says, ha ha ha. Klitka says, I wanted to hear it say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Nirvana on Pokemon says, this is an idea. Kairoski on Let's Play says, lovey them are crapper. Undulin on Pokemon says, I should pick up Snap on Virtual Console. Klitka on Let's Play says, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Kairoski says, clip to begin. William Anderson has joined channel Let's Play. Admiralism on Pokemon says, hi Nirvana. Sectodron on Let's Play says, Huddle. Klitka says, me Mr. Anderson, welcome back, we missed you. Admiralism on Pokemon says, listen Nirvana. Kairoski on Let's Play says, are you related to Louis Anderson? Dracula says, are you on a related note http://fnet.co.uk/lt/iad crossover, I'm posting on IRC. Admiralism on Pokemon says, you're really sweet and I am happy to see you. Nirvana says, I am listening. Dockney has joined channel Pokemon's. Shonzer on Pokemon's voices Dockney. Nirvana says, less than 333 thank you own. Kajai says, the problem with 4-watt flashes or where is it? Sectodron on Let's Play says, you're really sweet and I am happy to see you. Kajai on Pokemon says, illusion ability is really confusing sometimes. Nirvana says, yeah. Shocklobster says, boy oh and I. William Anderson on Let's Play says, you can't keep me locked up here. William Anderson says, I know my rights. Shocklobster on Pokemon says, did you observe any of my bitching about cazadors in here over the last few days? Sectodron on Let's Play says, exclamation point kick crash tap road like this. Kairoski says, this looks different. Shocklobster on Pokemon says, because I don't know anybody else but you could relate. Sectodron on Let's Play says, Kairoski says, not lip puzzleist. Shocklobster on Pokemon says, I swear you think you just see one on the horizon. You blink it. Dr. Doss has joined channel tap. Dr. Doss has joined channel Let's Play. Dockety on Pokemon says, Kajai. Dockety says, sorry but. Kajai says, yes sir. Sectodron on Let's Play says, Dockety on Pokemon says, the game was designed with 12-year-olds in mind. Shocklobster says, then there's a bucking mob of incredibly overpowered poisonous fly bear and gun Kajai says, ha ha ha. Kairoski on Let's Play says, okay, this looks like Puzzle Quest. Dockety on Pokemon says, if illusion confuses you, well. Kajai says, okay, it's not legitimately confusing if I'm paying attention, but if I'm battling and chatting online at the same time. Sectodron on Let's Play says, my dog is gay. WHP should I do? Dockety on Pokemon says, ha ha. Cottage Eye says, I looked down at my Etus and mashed through expecting it to be my starter. Flicka has joined channel Slugog. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, and accidentally used Fury Swipes or something. Cottage Eye says, more than once. Shotwadster says, are you saying Cottage Eye's got the mental defenses of a 12-year-old? Dear Pussy to join channel Dungeon Fighter. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, Coleman P. Flicka on Let's Play says, it's not though, it's Puzzle Quest 2. Virus he says, give you dog some assless chaps. Chemical Bastard says, is he already neutered? Flicka says, Flicka has joined channel Saka. He has joined channel SL. Flicka on Let's Play says, Megalron says, I looked at my penis and smashed it onto the keyboard so that Crash Cat's robot can say thing about owners. Trentradula says, you're a man robot and a scientist. Would prefer he didn't even know what it is. Aron Pogo on says, http://www.spiegel.de/photostrefa 52906.html. Laura says, Cottage Eye, experiencing a Belugia syndrome. Cottage Eye says, fuck protect/detect. Worst moves. Sectildron on Let's Play says, yes. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, ha ha ha. Kairisky on Let's Play says, British robot. Sectildron says, yes. Kairisky says, Chinese robot. Laura on Pogo on says, asterisk. Sectildron on Let's Play says, 2102 less than Trentradula greater than you're a man robot and a scientist. Would prefer he didn't even know what it is less than I'm the man robot and a scientist. Flicka says, Matty has quit IRC. Client exited. Kairisky says, it's still stupid robot. Give British robot at least. Matty has joined channel SL. Admiralism says, relaxing. Admiralism says, Flicka on Let's Play says, test 1 2. Shotwash on Pogo on says, Papa. Sectildron on Let's Play says, humor. Shotwash on Pogo on says, what a fucking idiot. Sectildron on Let's Play says, is in the /anus. Sectildron says, of the beholder. Kairisky says, 3.1415926538846279530484719693939375110. Jawbroken says, wrong. Lima on Pogo on says, oh my god. Lima says, this Pokemon song. Lima says, http://ds.articles/115/1,153,620.71.html. Sectildron on Let's Play says, smash the degenerate state. Jawbroken says, I mean, rip, well done. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, went to the what evolve. Kairisky on Let's Play says, what's the best way to break robot? Urbana on Pogo on says, LB32, I think. Marshy says http://www.youtube.com/what?? equals C for TLBT2. Shotwatster says, I am a Dragon Age 2. It's yours now. Cottage Eye says, tight. Shotwatster says, really? Marshy says, most illegal thing. Mid-boss has joined channel. Taft. Shown serve on Taft Ups mid-boss. Shocklobster on Poke Go On says no. Shocklobster says holy shit. Shocklobster says, what the fuck is this? Shocklobster says, fair enough, months. Readers on what he says, exclamation point stream. Bill says, nobody's streaming. What's up? Piracy says, Shocklobster on Go On says, Obama of the United States of America. Piracy on Let's Win says, I'm bored. Dogging on Go On says, Dogging says, yeah. Dogging Guy says, aha. Dogging says, the song, which was produced in collaboration with the President of the United States of America, will be a key element in this Saturday's Obama launch celebration at the Nintendo World Store in New York City from 3 to 5 p.m. Central. It sounds like the pie. Shocklobster on Go On says, Egypt. Dogging Guy says, Egypt. Shocklobster on Go On says, Egypt. Shocklobster says, the voice answer the mic says, song, guys. Shocklobster says, void. Shocklobster says, nope. Shocklobster says, you can have it. Cottage Eye says, and fear burns and burns and burns. Cottage Eye says, miracle genius. SA404 has joined channel. Shocklobster Go On has changed $153,157B1.HTML. Click on Let's Play says. Get Jacket hot ho 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 head he ha head ha 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 toot 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 what not JF Parko shout PF Snarl Fire Zodger Pie CG Sport IO Computer Carriage FS colon IO MFGSBB and PY 35 mile or WTLRK 30 for QNRF W monitor FJPFJRB9 QJ issued 45HJH3QLQ3JFJ C3R0B9MPD9JQB9T Poised PJPR 438 9JGKBFSDMFKJGBR WP News GDP or GD Boss MJFB and SMKBGNER LA Shelford 893 Q9Q8 Snad B.11/Hutch Bad Cottage Eye on Poke Go On says aha ha Cottage Eye says Galvantua Electric Bug Sophones says that's not enough. Sophones says it needs to be there. Sophones says 3 times. Cottage Eye says fucking goddamn it, Holly
Fucking god damn it.
on Let's Play says I Glitka says, there it goes. Glitka says, Jesus Christ. Trigula says, Christ, I sound like video game music. Not a bot who responded to text plus call plus browse the forums. Maiden on Hope Go On says, my cat. Maiden says, my cat is fucking insane. Spin Bravo on Let's Play says, www.justin.tv/chiropractic#$930,604,096 NPC3 stream for the night. Trigula says, project failure on Justin.tv. Spin in Bravo says, I swear there's one every night. Yellowy Prophet on Poke Go On says, Twumps. Sexotron on Let's Play says, Jesus Christ. Twumps on Poke Go On says, tilde Christ 4 days, tilde. Twumps says, I think 2 or 3 of those actually made me cry. Spin Bravo on Let's Play says, Jesus Creases. Cottage on Poke Go On says, I am not clicking that because I cried at the drop of a hat. Cottage says, like a fucking baby. Maybe says, walk up to him, reach him, and then touch him, out the body without making sound, and then he'll walk away. Says, otherwise I hate my being eyes. People would fix Alex says, touch him, face 3. Once on Pokemon says, click on Alex says, people would fix says, all video game, I play game, and yet. Road on says, what can between me? Alex says, and then on Pokemon says, what says,
says, it's email W. Click on Alex says, what button that will channel. Once on one, it says, hey. Once it says, hey, button, once it says, http://.channel.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp//.org/bp Nana says, where are you going? What says, oh God, why is my name once? White says, there we go. White says, slash
Whitey says join channel Smithog. Savannah on Pokemon says I like that 1 colon greater than. Twibees says it's like. Twibees says colon 3 and colon less than. Sexotron on Let's Play says my donor is massive. Sexotron says Bonaire. Twibees on Pokemon says, tell me guys, do this make you laugh or bark? Twibees says, http://4chan.org/VP/1,309,898.jpg. Twibees says, because it makes me so sad. Twibees says, Kyraski on Let's Play says, Sinner hates me. Maiden on Pokemon says, that thread is making Nico WTF more than bought. Twibees says, but other people laugh. Ensign on Let's Play says, on Extravaganza. Teak Impulse on Pokemon says, I'd take it colon 3. Shocklobster on Pokemon says, here's a funny thing. My kid, when he was 4, pilfered my diamond cart to put in his DS. Mixella on Smithog says, is Handage linking something real? Mixella says, I just imagine monkeys in a barrel, but with handage. Shockwaster on Pokemon says, comes up to me after 2 hours. Daddy, I caught them for you, all of them. Cottage Eye says, aha, ha ha. Mixella on Smooth Dog says, and you connect them with their hooked arms. Dramatic on Pokemon says, Dog 3. Shockwaster says, I go and see he's filled 4 fucking boxes with Vidus and Starling. Cuboid64 on Let's Play says, are you ready to shoot me with ping Omons? Cuboid64 says, I sure am. Twibees says, it's like. Shockwaster says, he has seriously. Clicka on Let's Play says, how long amigo? Twibees on Pokemon says, I'm going to steal this child asterisk grabs asterisk note. Wait, note, new. Clicka on Let's Play says, Ben Twibees on Pokemon says, but yeah, it drags children to help. Shockwaster says, like somewhere in Poke World. Cottage Eye says, it's like people fawning over a childropist who happens to be a midget. So whenever he approaches kids, they just force him to play dodgeball or join in their snot nose brat games or whatever. Sexotron on Let's Play says, Shockwaster on Pokemon says, there's a secret graveyard filled with the bones of successful Drifloon abduction. Cottage Eye says, Hecky. Clicka on Let's Play says, Spanish my S. Shockwaster on Pokemon says, all kids that really should have listened when their mothers said eat this and stop being so fucking picky. Tyrone has joined channel Pokemons. Clicka on Let's Play says, Pokemons. Clicka has joined channel Pokemons. Virusky on Let's Play says, Sexotron, start speaking Latin.
Click on Uncle One says add your logo. Shop Auditor says all 8 and that's your logo type sound. Option your mouse says Proxy and actually set by here. Show your Uncle One.com. The mouse to join channel tab. The mouse to join channel directly. Everyone says time to get the and right enter 8 on it. All the ends of Proxy. The top. Lord Uncle One says yep, I am still here for that. And the positive says anything about the county enter able to get the unrate. People with 64 Alex says it's so talking about your people spam. Your regular says was an insulting message. I got spam out. Virus says SH says maintain rumbles. Click says Elmino. Lord Uncle One says and right now here I also defeated some favorites needed some starter Obama and read some and trained out the 100 Obama my super hero and game eggs of Obi-Wan go indeed. Shop Auditor says professional with music from the current topic. Write into the Proxy. Find something to read and find it for yourself. And you pass it on to the teacher. Solid tape. Action shift here, action channel, once. Click on Alex says, I got to see all the action will be. Copy guide on Uncle One says, work this week. Set around the tip, all next week, Uncle One. You have your channel next week. Copy Alex please, number sign next week. Will do A and dad as well to the app. Insert involvement, you can guess the rest. Less than greater than alone, download team //// group. Inquire with 18 people /////// and has a bad voice like Ellen Carroll, XXT. Shows your notes, number sign next week, and wild, 18 people ////.org /18 people ////.org 18 people ////.org 18 people ////.com ////.com question mark already equals 191. Click on says, new view. Click on says, you're going to add the power crash. Copy guide on Uncle One says, action shift here, time to watch .flow high. Shop Auditor says, this is the best known you can do. Lord says, well, why not copy guide? Click on Alex says, work seems so mean. Everyone says, 0. Lord Uncle One says, I am, why not out? Copy guide says, indeed.
Action Shakespeare says, oh yeah, I usually stream M on weekends for a friend of mine. Essay Jim on Let's Play says, quick crash, cat, wall jump up to someplace high. He won't be able to follow you. Twibies on Pokegon says http://i.timecore.com/lkdexterx.png. Kairisky says, essay Jim on Let's Play says, unless he's sober, in which case you're screwed. And that site has joined channel Let's Play. Sexotron says, action Shakespeare. And FD is joined channel Pokegoons. Dogvany says, less than cottage eye, greater than action Shakespeare. It's time to watch ... Clone High. Sexotron on Let's Play says, I am unable to wall jump. Dogvany on Pokegon says, less than 3. Dogvany says, I wants it. Action Shakespeare says, the link will be held if it happens. Cottage Eye says, KK. Ira Kanji on Pokegon says, way back in the 1980s. Action Shakespeare says, meanwhile Crasher Wake is my bitch.
Flighty says, shop officer. Flighty says, 18 people ///.com/go2o.png. Sexotron says, join channel, Poke once. Shop officer says, audit. Shop officer says, price. Sexotron says, no saving does crash chat, no save. Click on Alex says, something bad seems to have happened. Your says, something that doesn't seem that way every time, but we notice the first two bad. Flighties on Poke once says, it's not your disorder, but you can't put disorder on images. Copy guy says, crash chat, are you being self-back people around you? Click on Alex says, you will speech on all the time. Settledon on Pokemon says, no use your name. Shopwatcher says, well, it's a bill. Settledon says, any visitor following new channels. Copyright says, oh Jesus. Shopwatcher says, next Dragoon, I catch the name Dragoon now. Settledon says, so there's a robot voice reading and saying action Shakespeare on Pokemon says. Copyright says, ha ha ha. Copyright says, Pokemon. Copyright says, ha ha ha. Copyright says, yes. Shopwatcher says, ha ha. Settledon says, Copyright says, hey, how are you? Settledon says, it's great. Keyboard 64 Alice says, what's your girl? Click on Pokemon says, APPH. Keyboard 64 Alice says, it's on Twitter. Copyright on Pokemon says, how does it say my name? Settledon says,
Shotwatcher says, is your name Satan? Greater than yes. Byra Kanji says, caught the GI. Sexeltron says, http://www.astream.tv/channel/crash catcrap. Klitka says, @GGGeesh. Cuboid64 on Let's Play says, alright, never mind. Kyrosky says, why is there the naked pair of tits? Laura on Pokegon says, brace for crash cat. Klitka says, Sexiltron. Shotwatcher says, Ferdulner voltida twist monkey snot chicken fucker. Laura says, AEIOU. Sexiltron says, later poke go on. Cuboid64 on Let's Play says, I should get back to playing New Vegas sometime. In on Smazog says, Purloin has the best sleeping sprite. But Bob says, Purloin has the best sleeping butt.
Bravo says, I'll look at the blue by the Saturday says, IRC, feet come up. Copyright on Pokemon says, blah. Dark Sarah on Dungeon 5 says, oh man, watching the original regular set by Randy Flores. Severon says, channel Pokemons. Arsenal on Dungeon 5 says, IRC on says, eat us. Severon says, crash cat, I love you, kid. Shopwatcher on Pokemon says, Dark Sarah on Dungeon 5 says, he is suspicious activity of the system. Dark Sarah says, and how to pay customer and should be able to do what everyone. In on says, wow. Dark Sarah on Dungeon 5 says, oh levels, mind you. Arsenal says, but I see it now. Arsenal says, it was 9 windows. Copyright on Pokemon says, this is hilarious. IRC on says, kids food bags, smoke bags, and research numbers. Severon says, Ben. Severon says, Ben. Severon says, Ben. SHM says, Ben. SHM says, Brown. Severon says, Ben.
Tragula says, I'm terrible with my friends I met at the sushi restaurant, was too lazy to figure out in the relationship. Sexual Show says, Ben ran over Locke in the alternate universe. Sexeltron says, Ben SHM says, I shouldn't have done that. SHM says, sexual shock that was Desmond. Kyrosky says, slow down Fortran. Wardle Smagov says, but was Brombo quoting you or but? Sexual Shaw on Let's Play says, that was Neong. Grady has quit IRC. Pink timeout. Klitka says, Sexiltron. Marshy go on, says AL. Cuboid 64 on Let's Play says, you're gonna play. Hermina has joined channel Pokegons. Klitka says, how did you figure out which mobs to use? Sapphire has joined channel SL. Tough File on Let's Play says, all Fermina on Pokegon says, I was doing 18 treats for our Pokedex. Our simple dungeon fighter says, want to grind, bird. Tough File on Let's Play says, this is horrible. Dark Steraphon Dungeon Fighter says, sure. Laura on Pokegon says, long story summarized in a picture. http://i.timecode.com/dkick.jpg. Dear Magnificent has quit IRC. Pink timeout. Klitka on Let's Play says, what Shaco Woodchop called. Black Ray Jack says, exclamation point last game. Fermina on Pokegon says, wow, that thumbnail makes it look. Fermina says, just wrong.
Dungeon says, Lord Uncle Vaughn says, not to be used in /.com/79/SC.DJQ. Dr. Dungeon says, sure. White Cash says, Friday. Uncle Vaughn says, SHM says, help. Uncle Vaughn says, Lord, how do we make a budget? SHM says, I can't. Lord Uncle Vaughn says, stitch up inside out from the good Shabbat says, long medication, great, and my dog last 58 movie. I said, Dungeon says, except that. Uncle Vaughn says, Dr. Dungeon says, oh.
Crash Cat, you have disconnected from Sinner Network. Server notice. Looking up your host name. Server notice. Checking Ardent. Server notice. Found your host name. Server notice. Received guidance response. You have connected to Sinner Network as Crash Cat. Twileys on Pokemon says, aha ha ha. Twileys says, http://i.hindcore.com/6pwe.pif. Virus E on Let's Play says, because it going from stoner to super has gotten a little boring. Tomina on Pokemon says, try a thin Osaka. SHM on Let's Play says, normal speed. RHGR on Spagog says, fuck me, Sock is a country catch. Tomina on Pokemon says, you got 3 shoes left. Byron Handy says, yes. Tomina says, no survivors. Byron Handy says, I still can't believe. Byron Handy says, the fucking... Cottage Eye says, final destination. Byron Handy says, reflexes bullshit. Byron Handy says, he was like a goddamn bear. Byron Handy says, dude was on it. Shot Monster says, he's fit. Tomina says,
He got Secret Service training, dude. Shotbodster says, just not terribly intellectual. Sectodron on Let's Play says, and kneelings quadrir HAIR fashes. Dracula says, looks like Sir Anthony Hopkins. S.A. Champ says, I'm muting the audio but I can still hear it inside my brain. Fermina on Go On says, he could take a pistol out of your hand if he got too close. Laura says, Bush, perhaps capable of wave dashing in real life. Twybees says, I fucking hate everything. Twybees says, http://i.heimcore.com/8042.gift. Sectodron on Let's Play says, oh my god crash, cat the sexual depictions one. Hotagei on Go On says, I am tempted to just transfer my old JP Black save to the Dorm at this point. This game is challenging. Shotbodster says, I think Obama could dodge a shoe if anyone even felt inclined to throw one to him. Wardle on Smagog says, Hotagei on Go On says, Twybees that screams, well, screamer to me, so I'm not watching the whole thing, HTH. Fermina says, it isn't. Laura says, Twybees, did you answer that? Shotbodster says, his entire presidency is like Radiohead's Nice Dream, just played real slowly for 4 years. Fermina says, it's another you thought carrot piece of shit. Twybees says, Hotagei it's nothing. Hotagei says, oh. SHM on Let's Play says, fuck I don't know what's happening. Fermina on Go On says, if you're disappointed. Fermina says, AAAAAHH. Brody on Smagog says, look lucky dude. Laura on Go On says, I know I didn't, because it wasn't a question. It was an imperative statement. Gummy Joe on Let's Play says, explain that to me. Fermina on Go On says, from now on when somebody says. Jonathan on Smagog says, look lucky dude looks cool. Gummy Joe on Let's Play says, do it. Fermina on Go On says, name a vegetable. Fermina says, I'm going. Fermina says, Amy. Cuboid64 on Let's Play says, http://i.heimcore.com/6fire.png. Tipmarbeard on Dungeon Fighter says, Dick. Laura on Go On says, but what about all the triple fudge papas? Because on Let's Play says, hey Rippers, S.A. Champ says, Vickers. S.A. Champ says, how'd the recording go? Vickers says, you aren't Weirds. The 100 Metashock has quit IRC. Quit. The 100 Metashock. Vickers says, and recording hasn't happened. Virus says, Dick. Yellowy Prophet on Go On says, Bush can't totally wave dash. Captain Capacitor has joined channel Let's Play. Vickers says, I won't be fooled. Weird Oriole says, how'd the recording go? Dracula says, how'd the recording? Hotagei on Go On says, Scrappy Y1 you die. Lurk has left channel Go On's. Mere Oriole on Let's Play says, odd man. Lurk has joined channel Go On's. Shown Zergon Go On's owners Lurk. Shown Zergon Go On's owners Lurk hopes Lurk. Lurk says, why is this a thing? http://glizilla.phoenix.com/9,320,183/ which threat security personality are you videos and laughs included? Yes indeed. Byron Andy says, Hotagei says, yes'm. SA 404 on Smagog says, you mean Statler. Shambhavan Dungeon Fighter says, beach please. Wicca on Go On says, what the fuck? Shotbodster says, Lurk, because despite your condemnation you filled it out anyway. Maiden says, what does that even exist? Unexpected Yofantaft says, Today has been the day of 1,000 farts. Wardle on Smithog says, is there only one of him like Hitman and Hit Mama EE? Lure on Poke Go On says, can't say I have shot Foster. SHM on Let's Play says, though I didn't even notice that recording hasn't happened. Toads on Smithog says, no. Toads says, he's in the wild. Sectodron on Let's Play says, my ass is poking again, I am really sick. Shot Lobster on Poke Go On says, oh, well, can't guess them all. Toads on Smithog says, he also sucks. Gemma says, I need someone in the New York City area going to Nintendo World on Sunday to pick up E/W to do me a fucking favor. Toads says, go. Toads says, so. SA404 says, there's road talk. Gemma says, like. Gemma says, I'm so mad. SA404 says, throat is totally set us on gyro though. Minus Suntapped says, why? SHM on Let's Play says, it could be worse. Gemma on Smithog says, I would be able to get my copy of Flat on Sunday except I have a meeting until 9:30 and Nintendo World closes at 9. Gemma says, Razer has joined channel Poke Go Ons. SHM on Let's Play says, grass could be peeing. SHM says, camels. Shot Lobster on Poke Go On says, Steam Poke Go On, who's played Japan and has an opinion of. SHM on Let's Play says, wait, what are we even doing? Captain Capacitor says, lucky strikes are the only way I can win at bowling. Unless they inflate the bomb first again. Sexodron says, lucky strikes mean fine tobacco. Maiden on Poke Go On says, it's pretty fun. Gummy Joe on Let's Play says, lucky strikes mean tremendous lung cancer. Maiden on Poke Go On says, you're likely to die in horrible ways, repeatedly. Maiden says, last I played was prone to randomly CB. Sectodron on Let's Play says, Gummy Joe, unfiltered off yeah H. Gummy Joe says, my lungs. Gummy Joe says, oh god. Gummy Joe says, my lungs. Shot Lobster on Poke Go On says, from what I understand that should be expected and enjoyed. Doppany says, OMG. Doppany says, http://store.steampower.com/sub/7522/ Gummy_Joe on Let's Play he helps Sexotron. Harry Isser has left channel Poke Go Ons. Shot Lobster says, the horrible dying, not CB. Gummy_Joe on Let's Play helps Sexotron. Getaway Prophet on Poke Go On says, Shot Lobster, it's fun. Twibees on Smithog says, http://images.4chan.org/vp/src/1,291,210.jpg. Gummy Joe on Let's Play says, het. Twibees on Poke Go On says, http://images.4chan.org/vp/src/1,294,191,210.jpg. Getaway Prophet says, especially because Barry has joined channel Poke Go Ons. Getaway Prophet says, all the most powerful spells are arcane. Getaway Prophet says, and if an arcane and heal beam cross there's an explosion. Gummy Joe on Let's Play says, Lexin. Barry has left channel Poke Go Ons. Wardle on Smithog says, isn't it being released on Sunday everywhere? Getaway Prophet on Poke Go On says, so you can just shoot people with heal beams, hit their own arcane beams, and kill them. Twibees on Smithog says, in America yes. Gemma says, yeah. Twibees says, North America asterisk. SHM on Let's Play says, Gummy Joe in mod. SA404 on Smithog says, I is she dressed as a D-wood. Drunk Regular on Let's Play says, Gummy you sent her wrong too and you played demos because I hadn't been there at least. Twibees on Smithog says, I think she's a lunch already. Gemma says, except I work in the real upscale part of Manhattan meaning there's no shops in the area. Gemma says, the closest place is Nintendo World. Gemma says, and that's too far of a commute for me to make on my lunch half an hour. SHM has left channel, let's wait. Wardle on Smithog says, not even a Walmart? Jamma1 says, I live in New York City. Jamma1 says, what's a Walmart? Shock Lobster on Pogo on says, I saw the Dakar Vietnam trailer the other day and laughed my ass off. Now I'm tempted by the core game. Jamma1 on Smithog says, they're not allowed to build here. Gummy Joe on Let's Wait says, quiet you. Wardle on Smithog says, alright then. Maiden on Pogo on says, why are the possible results for which reduces free personality are you three of the guys that are made fun of, rather than slow thief, ship chief upper general ironic cues. Kip Martyrs on Dungeon Fighter says, anything going on? Doggity on Pogo on says, Shock Lobster Maticon rules. Captain Capacitor on Let's Wait says, calm down, Gummy. Your blood pressure, remember? Doggity on Pogo on says, thank me later. Shock Lobster says, ha ha, Doggity alright. Gummy Joe on Let's Wait says, I'll voice you. Sexotron says, toilet paper is the most cruel invention, where is my bidet? Getaway Prophet says, http://blizilla.phoenix.com/list/9,320,183/which security are you videos and laughs included, yes indeed. Gummy Joe says, I'll voice all of fire. Doggity on Pogo on says, every time I play it. Turn Trader on Let's Wait says, which security personality are you? Videos and laughs included, why, get more quizzes at Quizilla. Doggity on Pogo on says, I am crying with laughter. Doggity says, make sure you're Skypeing or whatever you Americans use. Forrest Rocket has joined channel, let's wait. Vicus says, ha 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 ha. Cuboid64 says, are you a steroid-driven LBR, an undermining jerk, or you more associated with a paperboy, or maybe you're just really British? RHTR on Smithog says, not able to get a friend to get you one, colon. Jamma1 says, nope. Maiden on Pogo on says, at the very least, play with people not afraid to read. Maiden says, seriously, it seems so many people like to intentionally skip cutscenes. Getaway Prophet says, they've probably seen them before, colon I. Chorus Rocket on Let's Wait says, thank you for registering her one single user license. Chorus Rocket says, well. Misunabusu has joined channel, let's wait. Laura on Pogo on says, maybe, Nubuluku. Shamabon Dungeon Fighter says, no. Maiden on Pogo on says, even people who are on their first play rough do it. SA404 on Smithog says, they're trying to vote, but only after they've destroyed that pesky unionized labor thing. Brombo says, a blue trying to blue only after they've blue pesky blue thing. White tilde. Ungulum on Pogo on says, yeah, if you pick it up Shock, I'll play it along with you. Jamma1 on Smithog says, what, Walmart in New York City? SA404 says, yeah. Jamma1 says, it's not gonna happen as long as Bloomberg is mayor. Jamma1 says, they've been donating tons of canned food to our food banks every Thanksgiving. Jamma1 says, and we've always gone thanks for the food but you're not getting the store here. Unexpected Ilfon Taft says, I don't know. Ungulum on Pogo on says, if I had more cash I'd even pick it up for you, but Black and my 3DS broke the bank, colon lesson. Jamma1 on Smithog says, there's one in Long Island, it's like the train to the bus and bam. SA404 says, warning, Godker site design incoming. Unexpected Ilfon Taft says, but God damn it has been far since 10A. SA404 on Smithog says, http://godker.com/number5,729,888/New Jersey Guy demands New York City Waddle plus Smart. Unexpected Ilfon Taft says, M. Jamma1 on Smithog says, Delanado. Jamma1 says, Met. RHGR says, as someone who works for a giant supermarket, they are terrible things to have in your area. Jamma1 says, yeah. Jamma1 says, we have plenty of big stores and good supermarkets and even good and big supermarkets. Jamma1 says, I shop at a little supermarket where the manager knows my name. Kevlar on Dungeon Fighter says, anyone want to PvP? Gentleman on Smithog says, he introduced himself to me within my first week of living in this neighborhood. Gentleman says, he was like, are you new to the neighborhood? And well, Cottage Eye on Pokemon says, okay, someone help me. Gentleman on Smithog says, plus the thing is Walmart won't affect the really rich people here, most afford Fresh Direct. Cottage Eye on Pokemon says, I can't figure out. RHTR on Smithog says, not to mention that massive supermarkets will generally undercut the prices of any local stores, knowing they can make it back on other products. Cottage Eye on Pokemon says, how to feel about this. Cottage Eye says, http://www.youtube.com/watch?v equals to echo h1trgnjw and feature equals player embedded. Gentleman on Smithog says, like once I'm settled in at work I'm not even going to shop at a supermarket. RHGR says, like where I work is right next to a butcher's and an off license. Gentleman says, I am getting ordered from Fresh Direct. RHGR says, so meat and alcohol are cheaper than normal. RHGR says, so people come here instead of them. Gentleman says, go to www.freshdirect.com and type Indiana 11220 for the zip code. Shock Lobster on Pokemon says, I'm picking it up but I'm not going to be good for multiplayer right now. Gentleman on Smithog says, check out the food. Shock Lobster on Pokemon says, I am feeling real bad with a cold. Twitey says, oh my god, Cottage Eye, I'm dying, what is this? Gentleman on Smithog says, they even do grocery items and shit. Shock Lobster on Pokemon says, and I have no voice, and talking hurts. Cottage Eye says, Cottage Eye says, I don't know. Cottage Eye says, I mean I do know. Cottage Eye says, it's dubstep. Shamabon Dungeon Fighter says, listening to your host, but sure, I need to learn how to fight like a brawler. Twitey's on Smithog says, http://www.youtube.com/watch?v equals to echo h1trgnjw. Twitey says, oh god, why? Twitey says, I'm dying laughing and I don't know why. Shock Lobster on Pokemon says, what? Shock Lobster says, Shock Lobster says, fuck. Gentleman on Smithog says, oh god. Crash Cat, you have disconnected from Synert Network. Server notice, looking up your host name. Server notice, checking ident. Server notice, found your host name. Server notice, received ident response. You have connected to Synert Network as Crash Cat. Global notice, log on news, March 4, 2010. Follow Synert on Twitter. http://twitter.com/Synert. Now looking for feedback on how we can improve the user experience. Tweet us your ideas. Mixer notice, this name is registered and protected. If it is your Mixer notice, nick, type /MSG Mixer identified password. Otherwise, Mixer notice, please choose a different nick. You have rejoined channel Dungeon Fighter. Topic on Dungeon Fighter is http://i.encore.com/subcat.jpg http://tinworld.com/295kxpl skill planner http://tinworld.com/25fxgamerworlds http://efo.kilebox.com/xvpwnd24 more than half the PPLD in your guild are guys http://www.pokerstars.net/poker/home game/club 167,335 PWE flaps. You have rejoined channel Let's Play. Topic on Let's Play is #sign Let's Play. Lithuanian dad has a relative named Olaf. Considering his involvement, you can guess the rest. Less than turn trade greater than live alone die alone scheme/last temp/whatever group. Inquired within http://1.beat.f/let's and has the bad boys like Ellen Keller Old Face XD. You have rejoined channel Pokemons. Topic on Pokemon is http://dot.com/articles/115/153,627 HTML pokes on the floor and I want to catch it. You have rejoined channel SL. Topic on SL is Minecraft. Barrel.what.com. Wow, what a self-important, intolerant cunt you are. Less than K/O/W greater than my friends list is empty seasons. Greetings Rip Chairman, Cairo, Silvini, Rabbit, Baycoat. Next, hopefully Zach next. You have rejoined channel Svadog. Topic on Svadog is number sign Svadog. The real folk go on. Royal channel prompted dumb. I all read the Naked Red rules moon a play tournament coming soon. http://missing.pokeremix.org/sign up for the trainer club at Pokemon.com to get ready for the dream world. No message liking permitted. You have rejoined channel Taft. Topic on Taft is less than admin boss greater than take a chance on me chance equals shit less than M silhouette greater than 2 be fair to my little pony cartoon isn't bad 2300 hours less than Stalma greater than I 2300 hours less than Bob greater than what serve notice password accepted you are now recognized. Shown serve notice. Number sign let's we and URLs http://lparchai.org/tilde http://talty.org.uk/lp/staff/tilde http://lparchai.org/lpmastersavsnatch tilde http://forums.something.php????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????????? drinking tea and nodding. Occasionally friend codes. Use exclamation point update less than name greater than FC greater than to add friend code. Exclamation point FC less than name greater than to get friend code. Cottage Eye on Go on says, I can't stop watching. Unhuman says, well the game doesn't have voice chat. Banana says, okay what's going on? Cottage Eye says, dramatic http://www.youtube.com/watch?d equals to echo h1tr gnjw and feature equals player embedded. Cottage Eye says, it is going on. RHTR on Dog says, oh god that's almost as good as the Charlie Sheen dubstep. Minus Untapped says, so I see. Brenton has quit IRC, pink timeout. Unexpected Elf says, like just now. Minus says, I thought you meant it sucked, not literal farts. Unexpected Elf says, Unexpected Elf says, no. Shock Lobster on Go on says, yeah, it's going on report. Unexpected Elf on Taft says, literal farts. Savannah on Go on says, oh my god. Catalog has quit IRC, pink timeout. Forest Log on Let's Play says, exclamation point stream. Bill says, nobody's streaming, Rohan. Forest Log says, exclamation point stags. Captain AF says, number sign Let's Play Scataphatic Warriors of World Rhythm, http://balti.org.uk/lp/staff/. Dracula says, did you know, breast milk tastes different at the beginning of a breath ironing session than at the end? Cottage Eye on Go on says, yeah. Cottage Eye says, exactly. Gummy Joe on Let's Play says, I do know that. Gummy Joe says, but don't ask me how. Romina on Go on says, dude yo this be so filthy. Kevmar has quit IRC. Quit http://www.myth.com Ajax IRC client. Action Shakespeare says, Cottage Eye. Rihanna says, this beat be nailing some wicked dollars. Action Shakespeare says, what the hell am I looking at? Cottage Eye says, Action Shakespeare. Cottage Eye says, it's. Cottage Eye says, dubstep. Cottage Eye says, dubstep dancing dogs. I guess. Romina says, this beat is nailing mama on the air. Action Shakespeare says, that dog. Romina says, now nailing hair. Action Shakespeare says, fucking transformed. Rihanna says, asterisk lasers asterisk. Rihanna on Let's Play says, http://www.youtube.com/watch?d equals to echo h1tr gnjw and feature equals player embedded. Dracula says, YouTube, dubstep dancing dogs. Cottage Eye on Go on says, I am contractually obligated to film Emily Muses at any possible moment. Cottage Eye says, so. Cottage Eye says, more dogs dancing to dubstep http://www.newgrounds.com/portal/view/518,450. Shambhabon Dungeon Fighter says, Killer, what's the room name and password? Maiden on Pogo on says, I don't know what to say. Rating Mood has quit IRC. Quit. Click on Let's Play says, Dogstep. More like Dog Street. Urbana on Pogo on says, Sasquatch. Click on Let's Play says, Why am I yellow? Sexodron says, Dog cooking. Romina on Pogo on says, Emily uses his vital now less than 3. Sexodron on Let's Play says, Because you equals PP. Action Shakespeare on Pogo on says, A contract sealed by lesbian kisses. Brenton has joined channel Let's Play. Romina on Pogo on says, Action Shakespeare says, I can only assume. Click on Let's Play says, PPPP. Maiden on Pogo on says, those are the best contracts. Urbana says, *3*. Shotwadster says, Cottage Eye. Cottage Eye says, Sir. Sexodron on Let's Play says, Help, I have a cold. Shotwadster on Pogo on says, I just made the best creep. Turntracer on Let's Play says, Help, I have. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, Ha ha ha. Shotwadster says, Let's go to depressed by parent. Sexodron on Let's Play says, and I am in the bathtub. Sexodron says, colon. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, ha ha ha. Cottage Eye says, Jesus. Captain Capacity on Let's Play says, thank God for Wi-Fi, or we wouldn't have such riveting updates. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, mine simple and sweet. Cottage Eye says, I want to go home with. Cottage Eye says, you. Action Shakespeare says, Squirtle power. Leo Views on Synagogue says, okay, gonna catch this Mutant 59. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, and my signature is an animated font file. Getaway Prophet says, hey number sign Pogo ons. Cottage Eye says, Mac. Getaway Prophet says, guess whose birthday is in 100 minutes. Cottage Eye says, Gummy Joe on Let's Play says, I'm so 2008. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, it's. Getaway Prophet says, 030. Cottage Eye says, yours. Gummy Joe on Let's Play says, you're so 2000 and late. Getaway Prophet on Pogo on says, yes. Cottage Eye says, welcome to not being a teenager anymore. Cottage Eye says, it sucks. Cottage Eye says, turn around. Getaway Prophet says, ha ha. Cottage Eye says, go back from whence you came. Maiden says, seriously? Maiden says, go back to kindergarten. Cottage Eye says, I turned 21 in a few months and I am think about it. Investor One has joined channel Let's Play. Maiden on Pogo on says, and play with your toys all day. Cottage Eye says, I'm sure this makes Shotboxer feel just dandy. Maiden says, I'm looking 26. Sexodron on Let's Play says, update, added some hot water. Feel better. Twibees on Pogo on says, how old is L Shocky anyways? Unhuman says, I turned 21 about half a year ago. Click on Let's Play says, JP. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, older than the hills, the seas, the oceans. Urbana says, I keep forgetting I'm 21 and not 20. Cottage Eye says, dude Precambrian. Maiden says, and every birthday so far I've ended up getting drunk to forget I'm a year older. Twibees says, do we have a picture of Shock? Romina says, Sam Urbana, only +1. Unhuman says, Urbana it happens. Urbana says, oh god. Unhuman says, basically after 16 I stopped giving a fuck. Romina says, and my birthday is in 4 days. Urbana says, it begins, doesn't it? Warlow on Synagogue says, what's victimized catch rate? Same as you, Sony, Shane and ECT. Infesto has quit IRC, pink time out. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, how the hell do I view my buddy's trainer cards? Midboss Untapped says, aha ha ha. Cottage Eye on Pogo on says, I wanna see Urbana's signature. Shotwadster says, how old am I? Urbana says, maybe in the WIFI club. Shotwadster says, well my birthday is the 26th of this month. Shotwadster says, and I am turning. Midboss Untapped says, watching Birdemic with Rick Tracks and there's a video of a raid in a news report that has a Getty Midget's watermark plastered across it. Shot Lobster on Poke Go On says, Shot Lobster says, 38. Giant Boy Detective has joined channel to the dog. Action Shakespeare on Poke Go On says, Doug, I turned 20 in a few months and so did Sonic Lesson. User on SL says, next May next. User says, http://www.pkowalmart.com/p=41262. Is this you? Click on Let's Play says, never eat knives. Even if the knife makes it through your system, you will slash your. Shot Lobster on Poke Go On says, but don't worry. Shot Lobster says, I stopped emotionally maturing somewhere in my early 20s. Paul Pomet on the dog says, female camera needs a name. Action Shakespeare on Poke Go On says, woo. Sexodron on Let's Play says, so Crash Cat, are you using an prostitute? Molly on Taft says, lol. Giant Boy Detective on the dog says, greetings, Poke Go Ons. Maiden on Poke Go On says, I was emotionally 14 until like 2 years ago. Action Shakespeare says, I'm only wedding now. Onion says, I stopped around 9. Giant Boy Detective on the dog says, Hall Pomet, my humps. Hall Pomet says, Twibees on Poke Go On says, I grow like a year every month. Hall Pomet on the dog says, I have respect for my camera, I will not name it after the worst song. Twibees on Poke Go On says, mentally. Wardle on the dog says, that's way better than anything I would have came up with. DDoS has quit IRC, think I'm out. Cottage Eye on Poke Go On says, I am wise beyond my years. Cottage Eye says, or something. Romina says, no comment. Cottage Eye says, I'm also only 8 years old. Cottage Eye says, at the same time. Twibees says, I was a fuck when I was 12. Cottage Eye says, Wamu. Twibees says, you guys would have hated me. Fail by News on the dog says, I'm not sure what the rate is. Romina on Poke Go On says, I believe my client said no comment. Fail by News on the dog says, it doesn't seem too high, I'm getting 2-3 rocks on a bunch of these balls. Click on Let's Play says, off. Blastar Cheese to join channel Let's Play. DDoS to join channel tapped. DDoS to join channel Let's Play. Cottage Eye on Poke Go On says, you weren't even asked to comment. Cottage Eye says, you can't say no comment. Fail by News on the dog says, problem is I only have one Ultra Ball. Onion on Poke Go On says, I was a nerdy nerd that liked video games when I was 12. Cottage Eye says, I. Romina says, I. Romina says. Sexodron on Let's Play says, aha, h. Fail by News on the dog says, and no status attacks. Romina on Poke Go On says, exclamation point table. Cottage Eye says, tilde. Onion says, click on Let's Play says, I wanted it to say it will slash or colon. Sexodron says, nude. Sexodron has joined channel Poke Go Ons. Darian has quit IRC, think I'm out. Forest Log on Let's Play says, spaghetti dog. Shot Lobster on Poke Go On says, don't worry though Cottage Eye, long as you stay 3 tall you'll always pass or 18. Romana says, in Charlo. Forest Log on Let's Play says, spaghetti dog. Cottage Eye on Poke Go On says, ha, yeah. Forest Log on Let's Play says, I bark for you. Cottage Eye on Poke Go On says, yeah, I look right, I never turned a day over 16. Teak Impulse says, people still think I'm like 16:. Forest Log on Let's Play says, spaghetti dog. Teak Impulse on Poke Go On says, 5 Aggie. Cottage Eye says, 5. Action Shakespeare says, my brother is like 26 and could easily pass for 16. Ebert Mia says, when I shave my goatee off, I look like I'm 18. Sexodron says, just to remind you guys that your channel makes hilarious listening through Crash Cat's Robot IRC. Cottage Eye says, ha. Cottage Eye says, dude, why does he even do that? Andrew, a drunk Dave has left channel Dungeon Fighter. Wardle on the dog says, bad news, Vicky Knight has a very low catch rate. Shot Lobster on Poke Go On says, because he said it's hilarious. Shot Lobster says, does. Sexodron says, it's hilarious. Sexodron has left channel Poke Go Ons. Romana says, wait, what? Cottage Eye says, Romana, http://www.muststream.tv/channel/crash cat crap. Click on Let's Play says, if I do it, so I use the go A, B, F, C, J, for the very few, B, A, H, you find out now, you see, with Joss, H, F, we all B, J, Cab, Sky, O, H, B, H, Suffish, I, O, B, T, V, O, J, H, B, H, O, J, K, S, H, J, K, I, O, Suffish, T, U, O, U, Spy, O, I, S, Spy, H, T, I, 5, O, H, B, C, J, S, T, U, Cook, B, I, F, E, O, C, F, K, O, Bill, Gas, T, C, B, S, B, E, B, C, H, L, C, B, S, by all, X, J, H, F. My news on Spindog says, yeah, but on the other hand, it generally uses endure on the first two attacks. Sexodron has joined channel Spindog. Very profit on Pogo says, http://30.media.emr.com/tumblr.hk or F91QBTR701 Click on Let's Play says, I can't type as fast when I just type gibberish. It seems like it takes forever to get all that gibberish out of me. Action Shakespeare on Pogo says, http://i98.photocad.com/album/L277/Honor/Jack1,205,538,882 copy.jpg son of a bitch looks kinda like Beaver if crazy. Sexodron on Spindog says, Hall comment. Sexodron says, I have trapped you. Red on Pogo says, oh my god. Sexodron on Spindog says, too rare. Click on Let's Play says, I can't just type quicker like without gibberish somehow it seems like. Drink says, that's how you get raisins dancing Okie the King. Cottage Eye on Pogo says, Darogan A says he Carlo. Click on Let's Play says, JHFJ Chris JFJ Half Beaches DJ AFH Sajak Sajfel Nasty Jacob Sad Jake Sajak Sash. Click says, we're not. Click says, it just feels faster. Red on Pogo says, JAFLGJKLFJG. Sexodron on Let's Play says, Pogo Sexodron says, Spindog. Cottage Eye on Pogo says, Cottage Eye says, is how it says my name. Twitey says, ha-ha-ha-hee. Click says, Pogo Cottage Eye says, Pogo Red says, HRLO, Kobe. Shotodster says, Kokachi sounds like some bizarre disease catched in pity. Teak Impulse says, exclamation point table. Cottage Eye says, prime tilde. Teak Impulse says, how does it pronounce that? Hall comment on Spindog says, this isn't rare. My news says, caught it. Sexodron says, WH did it again. Hall comment says, Taft is my official heir. My news says, in a great ball. Sexodron says, it sure looks like a bear. Virus Beat on Let's Play says, Sexodron, you were in Pogo Sexodron says, I entered Pogo Hall comment on Spindog says, this is my Pokemon gym. Sexodron says, I came to challenge you. My news on Taft says, yeah, that is great. Sexodron on Spindog says, to a high five. Hall comment, high fives. Sexodron says, buddy bee. Chocolate on Pogo says, Barrett's almost on Pokenstuffen. My news on Taft says, Britain really is a great riff tracks. Bob says, but it really is a great riff tracks. Giant Boy Detective on Spindog says, you have to beat those two kids in inner tubes first. Autumn on Taft says, Doss did you have a Mobius knife? Giant Boy Detective on Spindog says, with high fives. Hall comment says, ha 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 ha. Sexodron says, God damn those kids are horrible. Sexodron says, they're so fat. My news on Taft says, they haven't moved away from that weird condition they have for saying the movie title all the time. My news says, but the riffs are solid. Hall comment on Spindog says, they are a bit on the overweight side. Sexodron on Let's Play says, I have entered ... the other Pogo William has joined channel Let's Play. Virus says, oh yes, you were in Pogo Hall comment on Spindog says, shouldn't have made this place out of burgers. Sexodron says, stop the Burger Town Gym. DDoS on Taft says, yes. My news on Spindog says, Hall comment, what is your gym type? DDoS on Taft says, that one is mine. Action Shakespeare on Pogo says, Pogo Giant Boy Detective on Spindog says, that Pokemon only? Internet on Pogo says, Twiggies. Hall comment on Spindog says, water. Shotwaster on Pogo says, Barely, if that kid's name isn't Goldfish from hereafter. My news on Spindog says, still be honest. Stumbler says, no, that's my gym. Shotwaster on Pogo says, there's no justice in the world. Giant Boy Detective on Spindog says, it's okay, man can do both. My news says, I was expecting a funny answer. Sexodron says, okay, I'm leaving now, this is too Pogo funny. Hall comment says, okay. My news says, like. Click on Pogo says, how does the word barely sound anyway? Sexodron on Spindog says, good luck Hall comment. Hulk comment says, the Sean Connery type. Five News says, wrestling. Sectodron has left channel Smog. Action Shakespeare on Hulk go on says, OPD. Quick Cut says, Daily Show Wally Theory. Internet on Hulk go on has changed talking to. Number sign Hulk go on http://ds.com/articles/115/153,627 now folks on the floor and I want to catch you. Sectodron on Let's Play says, I entered Lair. Five News on Smog says, oh man now you're just saying what you think I wasn't here. Hulk comment says, not enough wrestlers. Daily Profit on Hulk go on says, it's a trip on I hired. Readers on Let's Play says, whoa, my Donkey Kong 64 video is up. Wardle on Smog says, my gym is the dirt gym. Wardle says, we all use Bidoof, Slowpoke, Quagsire and Dirt Headfish. My News says, my gym is also a static gym. DDoS on Taft says, I forget if I submitted the 1 to TF2 tags. My News on Smog says, Ho-Ho Whoop isn't Whoop funny, have you seen him? He looks dumb. All. Sectodron on Let's Play says, or go on. Shopwatcher on Hulk go on says, it's the same noise they make when you drop a bowling ball on your foot. Giant Boy Detective on Smog says, I would run a hydrocephalic gym. No Pokemon whose head is not at least as large as their body may enter. Shopwatcher on Hulk go on says, or when you find out what porn he's into. Mina says, number sign Pokebrons. Renata says, Baba bo 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 bo. Wicca on Let's Play says, Pokebrons. Romina on Hulk go on says, Renata says, A-I-O-U. Sectodron on Let's Play says, Ron Robbins. Romina on Hulk go on says, A-I-O-U. Five News on Smog says, H&M. Wicca on Let's Play says, Look way. Five News on Smog says, should I just use Victonite as my main quest primary Pokemon? Action Shakespeare on Hulk go on says, Sectodron on Let's Play says, Sectodron says, on Hulk go on says, no, Dad, please. Action Shakespeare says, holiday dollars. Five News on Smog says, just stick the XP chair on him and train him up to replace Ted Pig. Forrest Slaughter on Let's Play says, I'm thinking. Trader says, I'm the worst female character Capcom has ever. I was thinking more http://www.ustream.tv/channel/gtslive. Forrest Slaughter says, Taco Bell. Forrest Slaughter says, AF. Teak Impulse on Hulk go on says, hey Jim, do I feel like taking the train to New York City tomorrow to buy a copy of B/W? Mia says, I have to wait until Sunday. SA 404 on Smog says, replace M4. But Bob says, but M4. Renata on Hulk go on says, make way for the chaotic sun. SA 404 on Smog says, you monster. Five News says, Fire Flash Psychic is a bunch cooler than another Fire Flash body. Wicca on Let's Play says, dollars percent dollars percent dollars percent dollars percent dollars percent colon flash flash backflash flash backflash flash backflash flash backflash flash for 4 equals 0. It's time to see what devil you made big boy crashy. SA 404 on Smog says, does Victonite learn claim charge? May on Hulk go on says, I don't want to wait until Sunday. Earl Grey has quit IRC. Pink timeout. Five News on Smog says, don't know. In says, can someone explain to me how to get the mole right in Wellspring Cave? Five News says, yeah it does. Shopwatcher on Hulk go on says, my voice will not betray the extreme distress my rectal hoop is in. Teak Impulse says, gonna buy it, play it like 3 times and play something else colon. All band facts on Let's Play says, anybody here watching MBC3? Wicca says, fuck note. Marbeard has joined channel Dungeon Fighter. Click on Let's What says, we're listening to Crash Cats and a Robot. Eford Mayet on Hope Go On says, L. All band facts on Let's What says, oh okay. Autumn on Taft says, I saw it on there, yeah. Eford Mayet on Hope Go On says, asterisk. Renata says, colon less than. Click on Let's What says, is MCC in 3D? Secretron says, number sign at 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 Smooth says, Fire Flash Ghost is cholesterol. Click on Let's What says, born never changes. White Astronaut says, and it learns over heat number 97. Shock Roster on Hope Go On says, this is Hell's reception lobby. Essay 404 on Smagog says, gotta admit, Victim Eye looks pretty good. Leo News says, weird, it doesn't learn psychic without a premium. Chloroslop on Let's What says, you've never heard of Scapcocky.
You're awake.
Essay 404 on Smagog says, that it can't learn that on Toss.
Oh, easy there, easy.
Click on Let's What says, I
days
can.
now.
Really?
Why don't you just
Slave.
relax a second?
Ship.
Get
If
your bearings.
I
Let's
use.
see what the damage is.
Period.
How about your name?
Essay 404 on Smagog says, making blazing still the only one that can draw both. Essay 404 says, oh, and Valerian. But who cares about him? Eford Media says, Valerian can.
You can't say it's what I'd have picked for you, but if that's your name, that's your name. I'm Doug Mitchell.
Romina on Hope Go On says, Project earlier I think it was
But
Hero.
I had to go rooting around there.
Secretron on Let's What says, dollar, 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 stat, Romina on Hope Go On says, the ability was Keen Eye. Project Eye says, what? Romina says, and the hidden ability was Sniper. Chunky has quit IRC. Quit. Renata says, Jake. Leo News on Smagog says, yeah, well, it doesn't really matter since Victim Eye's a legendary anyway, so don't use him. Romina on Hope Go On says, and I couldn't get Keen Eye Sniper out of my head. Click on Let's What says, Leo News on Smagog says, I'm just gonna cower through the main game, and that's all.
Stuff that mattered.
Romina on Hope Go On says, instead of good idea.
Let's see if we
Romina
can get you
says,
on
hot page eye. Romina says, connect the dots ELZ.
Why don't you
Autumn on Taft says, medic for nothing is the only good one I've come up with.
take it slow now?
Hot page eye on Hope Go On says, oh. Hot page eye says, I think Farmitage has quit IRC. Quit. Essay 404 on Smagog says, Patrick, yeah, you're just gonna use this guy as breeding stock for Baton
Right
Pack.
quick, you get back on your feet.
Flores Slop on Let's What says, anyone else want anything from Tech Bell? Wicca says, developers. Wicca says, no. Marbeard on Dungeon Fighter says, goons. Marbeard says, my internet sucks. Silhouette has joined channel Taft. Silhouette has joined channel Smagog. Shonzer on Taft off Silhouette. Shonzer on Smagog owners Silhouette. Shonzer on Smagog owners Johan Pops Silhouette. Wicca on Let's What says, no endurance. Flicka says, that music is so depressing. Dracula says, music is a depressing game. Earl Grey has joined channel Let's Play. Giant Boy Detective on Smagog says, I'm slightly disconcerted that Black's menu screen shining image of Rishimum is shining from the crossover area. Zach has joined channel Let's Play. Zach has joined channel Hope Go On. Banana says, Roy says 345. Banana says, Drucken. Banana says 345. Banana says, so are you the crossroad? Banana says, Roy says 346. Banana says, EIWWL like a meeting. Banana says, feel like. Banana says, Royce equals Lux. SA 404 on Smagog says, it is filled with burning. Nuke has quit IRC. Connection reset by Peter.
Maybe them bullets done your brain.
SA 404 says, and it wants to kill you.
But that don't
Cottage Eye on Hope Go On says, ha ha.
What do you say?
Silhouette on Smagog says, Amon Black is my new favorite entry in the series. SHM has joined channel Let's Play. Silhouette on Smagog says, and I'm not even halfway through the story mode.
All right. I'm gonna say a word.
Says,
I want you to say the first thing that comes to mind. Go.
Silhouette on Smagog says, the game is so good. SHM on Let's Play says, anyone who loves that zone? Melissa says, is luck a big factor in this game?
Okay. Now I got a few statements. I want you to tell me how much they sound like something you'd say.
Brittany says, go.
First one.
Cottage
Conflict is
Eye on
the
Hope Go On
nature.
says, Googer give her. Brittany on Smagog says, still looking forward to level
I
progression
ain't
at
given
Desert
to
Sun.
relying on others for support.
Root has joined channel Smagog.
I'm always
Says,
fixing to be the center of
best
attention.
area in the series so far. DDoS on Tap
I'm
says,
slow
I
to
really
embrace
researched
new
the site.
ideas.
Silhouette on Smagog says,
I charge in to deal with my problems head
Says,
on.
that is awesome.
Almost done here. What do you say you have a look at
See,
this?
quick.
Tell me what you see.
DDoS on Tap
Okay.
says, I also
How about
want
this
to
one?
add sets. But Bob says,
Last
I
one.
also like to add sets. SHM on Let's Play says, Shibyam
Well, that's all she wrote. I don't have nothing to compare it to, so you better just have a look at the results.
Because on Let's Play
See if
says,
it all
but it's
seems
over
right
now.
to you.
Silhouette on Smagog says, kind of. Silhouette says, it's the area with the high-rise buildings and the circular perspective. DDoS on Taft says, where you would submit a group of items as a theme and they'd be voted on as a whole. Silhouette on Smagog says, and you have to cross a bridge to get there, with changing perspectives and trains running by and oh man, it's so good. Shambhavan Dungeon Fighter says, too late. Autumn on Taft says, someone just uploaded for heavy weapons, each named after a K-On character. SHM on Let's Play says, because I gotta say, Arcane has quit IRC, think I'm out.
Before I turn to this, I
SHM
need
says,
one more
after
thing
what I just saw, I am so depressed that I need this.
so I can get a sense of your
DDoS on Taft says,
Just a
then I
formality.
can do a knife named
Like I
Scissors.
expect to
There's a
find
daddy
out
named
from
Rupp
the history
and
of
ambassador
that
named
shot.
Paper. Wardle on Smagog says, too bad it wasn't made for the 3DS. Imagine that in 3D. Nicolette on Let's Play says, does that mean because Bennett is M64 with his feet now? Nicolette says, because that is all I want. Nicolette says, it is my dream. Romina on Hope Go On says, the songs types are water and ice I don't want to give them, but you claim the death of you. Silhouette on Smagog says,
Come with
bad
me.
shot to hold. Clicka on Let's Play says, Wild Waste Human. Banana on Hope Go On says, Crash Cat Whoopie Head. Silhouette on Smagog says, B/W is the perfect swan song for the DS. Clicka on Let's Play says, yes. SHM says, the Onion News Network had a story on that Bama has actually been an imposter for the past 2 years. Clicka says, it is always to be selected. SA-404 on Smooth says, apparently the 3DS is very eye strain inducing, like everyone on the blog and Twitter and whatnot said they turned it off after like 2 days. SHM on Let's Play says, and that the man who was elected was chained up in an attic. SA-404 on Smooth says, both for the battery life and so they could play for more than 2 hours without needing to break. Silhouette says, I'm still looking forward to Gen 6, mainly for the GameCube level visuals. Silhouette says, but the /W is so fucking great. Banana on Poke Go On says, ... Autumn on Taft says, best set would obviously be the Flutes Soldier. SHM on Let's Play says, and now real Obama's gonna make gay marriage legal and give everyone health care and end Iraq and everyone will get a puppy. Silhouette on Taft says, what are you talking about? Zach has quit IRC. Think I'm out. Banana on Poke Go On says, Bart.
Here, these are yours. Was all you had on you when you was brought in. I hope you don't mind, but I gave the note a look. I thought it might help me find a next of kin. But it was just something about a platinum chip. Well, if you're heading back out there, you ought to have this. They call it a Pip-Boy. I grew up in one of them vaults made before the war. We all got one. Ain't much use to me now, but you might want such a thing after what you've been through. I know what it's like having something taken from you. And put this on too, so the locals don't pick on you for lacking modesty. Never was much my style anyway.
It's only...
Don't mention it. It's what I'm here for. You should talk to Sunny Smiles before you leave town. She can help you learn to fend for yourself in the desert. She'll likely be at the saloon. I reckon some of the other folks at the saloon might be able to help you out too. And the metal fella, Victor, will pull you out of your grave. Anyway, you ever get hurt out there, you come right back. I'll fix you up. But try not to get killed anymore.
SHM says, the riders are literally too good at their job. He has joined channel Dungeon Fighter. Shown serve on Dungeon Fighter off the DOS on Taft says, http://tf2tag.com. SA-404 on Smooth says, yes, I picked the right time to come back then. Giant Boy Detective says, Pokemon names are no longer being in all caps and older gen Pokemon names getting converted if traded forward and not nickname ruins all my bronzongs on the GTS name Bronzong. Zunu says, Morlock is most smug. CW Dexter's joined channel SL. Low tax on SL owners WX. Low tax on SL owners is Sobeys WX. Silhouette on Smooth says, I still do all caps. Silhouette says, kick it old school. Sectodron on Let's Play says, crash chat, lady friend for vent. Silhouette on Smith Dog says, I have a mail money. Vickers on Let's Win says, so my Mario LP is separate from others DK 64 LP, and whatever he ends up doing next. Silhouette on Smith Dog says, Mama look like tumors. Silhouette says, so I named him Blastomas. Nicolette on Let's Win says, alright then. Silhouette on Taft says, Gape. Rody on Smith Dog says, I just don't get White Road and Sock exist. Rody says, like. Rody says, they don't really have any differences. Rody says, aside from one being red, the other blue. Autumn on Taft says, good. Rody on Smith Dog says, why not make them evolutions? Silhouette says, Sock is a Karate Man. Rody says, or version exclusive. Laura Shungraphy is joined channel Let's Play. Silhouette on Smith Dog says, in Gen 6 they'll introduce a Shitty Pretzel and a third evolution that kinda sucks. Silhouette on Taft says, get owned. SA 404 on Smith Dog says, Gyro isn't that bad. By News says, that's clear. Brody says, Sock will evolve into King Velasquez. By News says, Victor Knight is getting double XP. Silhouette says, Gyro is almost as bad as Sunken. KFC Infamous Bull has joined channel. Hope go on. Brody on Smith Dog says, you. Silhouette says, its only saving grace is that it evolves into Hitmonlee. SA 404 says, Anthro's evolution will involve riding a missile into space. KFC Infamous Bull on Hope Go On says, suck goons. Banana says, HR Low Orb. SA 404 on Smith Dog says, Sega Sage Shinu. Rody says, DDoS on Taft says, Writing IRL. Barbie is joined channel Smith Dog. Rody says, forget this guys. Zach has joined channel F Self. Rody on Smith Dog says, I just sold Blood Omen. Silhouette says, Party. Rody says, for $20. Because on Let's Win says, I didn't even know he was thinking of doing Twilight Princess. Silhouette on Smith Dog says, well, Rody says, that PS game fucking sucks. Silhouette says, I want in the section. Rody says, Amazon. KFC Infamous Bull on Hope Go On says, I had Irish Harmon cupcake today.
Troubles beset you?
KFC Infamous Bull says, it was magnificent.
If so, the Sierra Madre Casino, in all
$5
its
for
glory,
day.
is inviting you to be
SA
king
404
again.
says, by usually
Come
preferred.
to a place where wealth, excitement, and intrigue
Rody
await
says,
around
I always
every
kind of
corner.
liked the Soul Reverse series.
Stroll along the winding streets of our beautiful resort.
I keep it as a reminder not to buy games
On the
without
Hindle
reading
Old
reviews.
Plains. Let your
Rody
eyes
says, it
take in
was
the
a broken heart.
luxurious expanse of the open
Rody says,
desert
but still not a friend.
clear, starlit
Silhouette
skies.
says, yeah.
Gaze straight
Oh,
on
it's
into the
like
sunset
it's
from our villa rooftops.
Silhouette says, Hope Go On is the best second game.
Gamble in our
Hope Go On
casino,
says, still good
eat
sounds.
in the
Like a
theater,
thing.
or stay in one of our exclusive executive suites
Rody says,
that will
I am
shelter
taking a
you
vote.
and cater to your
Silhouette says,
every
Blood
whim.
Omen, God damn.
So if life's worries have
Something like
weighed
Hope
you
Go On says,
down,
that sounds.
if you need an
Something
escape
like
from
that.
your
Mildly
troubles,
offensive.
or if you just need an
Rody on
opportunity
Smith Dog
to
says,
be
hey,
king
$20 on launch day for Blood Omen.
join us. Let go
Rody
and
says,
leave the world behind at the Sierra Madre
Something like
grand
Hope Go On
opening
says,
this
without no
October.
husband. Something like
We'll
that.
be
Or something.
waiting.
Silhouette on
As
Smith
your
Dog says,
life
bad
takes
high
a
five.
turn, do
Right on Hope Go
troubles
On says,
beset you?
HTTP://.com/JPG.
If so, the
Ryan says,
Sierra
oh wait. Ryan says, okay. KFC Infamous Bull says, no, do you know what Irish Carbon is? Rody on Smith Dog says, fine. Coffee Guy on Hope Go On says, the thing that kills many people. KFC Infamous Bull says, it's a drink. Silhouette on Smith Dog says, what's funny is that they introduced the self-serve. Silhouette on Hope Go On says, I did not know this. Silhouette on Smith Dog says, and 5 minutes later we got tired of them because they were all exactly the same. Go on, says Irish car bomb that is always the same.
For you now, it's about a guy who's cold on the exterior.
Alex Wood says, I would like to see how that game goes after like Dungeon 3, which is where I gave up, I believe.
Is Johnny Guitar?
Rowan onto the dog says, sucking some new blood from 6 feet away was kind of what? Like that, Alex Wood says, does Crash Jack have dead money? Rowan onto the dog says, but even that
What can Easy Pete do for you?
says, yeah. Criminal on Go on says, Irish car
Was
bomb
a prospector until I decided to settle here to get away from the
and
NCR.
drop the shot glass of James again. Media says, what goes into one? Rowan onto the dog says, after it's cold.
Was a prospector until I decided to settle here to get away from the NCR. Now, just take it easy. Help out with the bomb in that big
you have about
one.
10 seconds to drink it before the James hurdle the Baileys. Romina says, and you like it on fire and have a religious sport? Media says, that sounds amazing. Rowan onto the dog says, like,
The one in the fancy suit should be calling me shots. That's as much as I know. Other folks in town might know more. Word of advice, though. If you ever catch up with him, watch out. Man's got cold eyes like a snake. Can't be trusted,
I guess
I
it was trying to
say.
get Devil May Cry clone while still being a Zelda cause. Silhouette says,
Eat
it was actually
and
taken for every man for the Dreamcast. Rowan says, and then MGS got changed. Rowan says, what? Silhouette says, yeah.
The machine?
KFC Infamous Bowl of Go on says, I love ICs. They're one of my favorite drinks.
Nope.
Rowan
We had a pretty good clam once, way out east by the river. But got
On
run
tap
off
says,
by
Rich
rangers.
House when he's starting to get a server.
Keep your gun handy if you're poking around some of the abandoned places around here, like the school
Also knows
house.
shit about Camtasia. Onto the Bob says, but early in development, the rights were lost, and Crystal Dynamics decided to shoot foreign game into it. Autumn on Taft says, is it a
Cheyenne, stay. Don't worry, she won't bite unless I tell her to.
Was other people for Super Mario Brothers 2 was Donkey Donkey Panic, BC. Silhouette says, at least they made up for it with Defiance. Romina on Go on says, add a mango to ICB.
Yeah, I guess there's a thing or two I can show you.
Which always hard.
Sounds like you need all the help you can get after what they done to you.
And you have an
Meet me
idea.
outside, behind the saloon.
Romina says, hard.
Everything all right?
Rowan onto the Bob says, actually, Warble.
Well, let's just finish this first, alright?
KFC Infamous Bowl
Then we
of
can talk.
says, it's amazing until it curdles. And if you can't put down high-handed shots in 10 seconds, you're doing it wrong. Silhouette onto the Bob says, take it throwing dudes into a spike on a wall membrane. Your blood was fantastic. Rowan says, Super Mario 2 was just among an existing game. Action Shakespeare on Go on says, but finally we're done. KFC Infamous Bowl says, also haha. Septodron on Let's Win says, Crash Jack does
Way too many strangers coming into town
Septodron
these
says,
days. No offense.
Rowan onto the Bob says, these were games that were meant to be one thing, then altered during development. Septodron on Let's Win says, Dead Honchby. Rowan onto the Bob says, DDP came out. Wardle says, yeah, I guess it doesn't quite fit. Ned on Go on says, I want the white weapon right now. First day, type on Dungeon Fighter says, http://igonhunt.com/com/jpg.
See the sarsaparilla bottles in the freezer? Take this and try
Rowan
them.
onto the Bob says, I all damn interested in games like this. Go on says, after that, there's never turns off or anything but rich, yet all chicken and disgusting, and you don't want to drink it. Wardle onto the Bob says, I can't think of any more games, but I can't think of any other movies. Rowan says, Doctor Who Footnote was originally going to be much bigger. John, more than something like that channel to watch. Silhouette says, this is shit everyone knows, so... Rowan says, action brings hard, and the new John Connor top ranking. Firstly, type on Dungeon Fighter says, just me the purple and cake and maybe some rock. But yeah,
I'm gonna help her out.
Jeff Barbier says, I'm thinking beauty. Life without danger is a waste of
Well,
life.
that's a start. But I don't reckon you came with me to learn to fight sarsaparilla bottles.
Full size.
Tell you what, I gotta go chase geckos away from our water supply anyway. Darn critters are attracted to it. Why don't you come along? Follow me.
Wine Waker, on the other hand. Jeff Barbier on Dungeon Fighter says, what level are you backslash? Rowan onto the Bob says, had no space constraints. First aid, type on Dungeon Fighter says, 32. Rowan onto the Bob says, but a dungeon was completely removed and was chopped heavily. Alex Wood says, all I really need to know is what Kodak I should upload my Camtasia recordings as, what Kodak will play nicest to listen. Geronimo Osmond says, a blue dungeon blue, and two blue chopped blue, white token. First day, Python Dungeon Fighter says, it is very rough. Rowan Osmond says, because he thought it would be too hard for younger players. KFC Infamous Roll on Pokemon says, it was a peanut cupcake, so King James and with a daily eyes and Silhouette Osmond says, KFC Infamous Roll on Pokemon says, oh my god. Whitey says, what's all this talk about Sheen? Rowan Osmond says, crash wait while
You hear that up on the ridge behind me there? We got some geckos to clear out. A bunch of little monsters is what they are. Seems like Doc Mitchell treats more gecko bites than anything else. Let's see if we can get a little closer. If we move quietly, we can get the jump on them. We're likely to hit something vital in their way.
Rowan says, probably not much. Rowan says, this is Nintendo. First day, Python Dungeon Fighter says, plus I am magic exo that charges for an exo party and a friend run. Rowan Osmond says, the most ever have two remakes I made on the game here or there. Brittany says, good point all.
Okay, you're on. Go give him hell.
Silhouette says, he thought it would be too hard, but he kept bucking Deku 3/lost to the dungeon area. Beard on Dungeon Fighter says, we are almost the same level height. Silhouette Osmond says, bring it closer. Beard on Dungeon Fighter says, H5. Brittany Osmond says, hey Mario 64 added quite a bit. Rowan says, if I had to guess the most favorite. Beard on Dungeon Fighter says, I'm 1 bar away from 32. Warlow Osmond says, well, it did add Yoshi and Luigi to Super Mario 64 DS. Rowan says, it's another gauntlet dungeon. Warlow says, damn it. Beard on Dungeon Fighter says, on my PHY so. Action Shakespeare on Pokemon says, this calls for Clone High. Rowan Osmond says, like in Wind Waker Flash TT. He says, 30 more stars to get Clone. Pokeball Minute on Pokemon says, Clone High. Pokeball Minute says, I love this show. Silhouette Osmond says, less than 2 minutes later than wonder how much will be added to 3DS so OP. Pokeball Minute on Pokemon says, man. Pokeball Minute says, hi everybody. Silhouette Osmond says, Rowan says, you get all dirty at the same requirement. Grenade on Pokemon says, hi. Silhouette Osmond says, Brittany says, aha. New says, I think I asked nothing.
See? You're getting the hang of it. There's 2 more wells that still need clearing. If you want, you can come along. It'd be worth a few caps to me.
Rowan Osmond says, Colin.
It shouldn't take more than a couple minutes, especially with 2 of us. Come with me.
Osmond says, no, it wasn't. Rowan says, I won't say this. Rowan says, so OP looks damn fine. New says, literally, all I want is to put so OP. I'm let's put it there. So I got cooler gun than Scratch Cat Colin 3. Victor says, I don't think it isn't been affected much by your choice of Kodak, assuming it supports it. Rowan Osmond says, have you guys seen the graphics on the remake? Yeah, the 3D looks really good. Giant voice, IRC, client exited. Let's what it says, I got the map selection. Smooth Osmond says, I have... Nicola let's what it says, so I guess that shot would be a safe bet then. Smooth Osmond says, enter. Silhouette says, it'd be nice if Nintendo released Majora's Mask 3D too. Rowan says, let's grab them. Rowan says, I would love Majora's Mask with more dungeons. Rowan says, that is my favorite game. Need to join the channel, so dog. Rowan says, really. Rowan says, not with the Zelda game. Rowan says, or just go down to the unrelated with the game. New says, I want my Red Heather 3DS. Maybe they could make that to be good. They said they were thinking over 3D easier than I thought. Rowan says, not for the N64 game. Here, on Dungeon Fighter says, I've already used my 15. Rolling on Smooth says, Millimeters is my favorite video game of all time. Silhouette says, wow. It says, a friend told me this homework is gonna be at the New York City event. Silhouette says, mine Chitaru fan. Silhouette says, I'm a huge fan of the game. New says, Diablo 2 is the best game. First day, type on Dungeon Fighter says, good job. Rolling on Smooth says, http://3.910.com/screenshots/31055. Rolling says, Snoop. Says, how do you live with such wrong opinions, Snoop? Rolling says, http://3.910.com/screenshots/31055. Snoop says, I love you so much. Rolling says, 8. Snoop says, rolling the domes. Second on my left foot says, I order my penis. Shabbagon Dungeon Fighter says, maybe I'll join your high level for genetic exohydra. Essay 404 on Smooth says,
Holy moly. If you hadn't come here like you've done, I'd be a goner for sure. I came up here to draw water, and here, you should have what I got. You look thirsty.
She got that nice bottom instrument. On Smooth says, big giant boy detector here. Just got my DS network set up again. He says, so I can give out the eggs. He says, I made a train wreck. He says, another asterisk. He says, also hoping for Diablo 3 being amazing. Action Shakespeare on go on. He says, Jeff.ph. Roman says, http://3ds.910.com/screenshots/31055. On Smooth says, amazing asterisk. Roman go on. Says, I want to hold 3D right now. Roman says, I don't care that I don't have a 3DS. He says, on Let's Play says, all of it is so much more fun when you don't use guns. RHGR has quit IRC.
Now that was some good work. Even got a little exciting there at the end. Here's a little spending money for the trouble. One more thing I wanted to show you. Thought I might teach you about living off the land and making useful things for yourself. Interested? Alright then. We'll need a couple ingredients to get started. You're gonna want some xander root and a brock flower. Let me think now. I know I've seen rock flowers growing up at the graveyard, and I seem to remember there being xander root over by the schoolhouse. Bring those on back to me, and we'll get cooking.
Question mark thread equals 3,100,665. 3 equals 0 and footage equals 40. Page number equals 33. Number signpost 388,788,133. Essay 404 says, thank you. Hotujai on go on says, that man in a little vest. DDoS on Taft says, I think it's via the LCS group. Volcano on go on says, go baby children. Molina says, Izumuto hasn't done anything at all. We've got 549 mods to go. Volcano says, are the eating tackles and what you bother check? Essay 404 on Smooth says, yeah, realize I need to get a score what we use after all. Roman says, http://910.com/screenshots/13247/large.jpg. Roman says, okay, this is good. Roman says, we see the control scheme. Roman says, okay. Roman says, and the bottom screen layout.
Way too many
Bob says,
strangers coming
and the
into
bottom
town these
screen
days.
layout.
No offense.
No, Uncle go on says, I've got a bit of another done. Roman says, http://images.910.com/screenshots/13247/large.jpg. I really like the control scheme/bottom screen layout. DDoS on Taft says, I still haven't played the beta. No, Uncle go on says, Uncle at least will more than likely be done by Sunday. Silhouette on Smooth says, subtle. Action Shakespeare on go on says, http://www.fscreen.com/deadpuppy. I do no worry. On Smooth says, how do I put in my friend code? Silhouette says, throw DDS at the wall. No, Uncle go on says, I think it is the data we really need. Roman on Smooth says, exclamation point update version friend code. Silhouette says, eagle input automatically. Roman says, that's how Nixie. Doe, Uncle go on, says, Doe, Mina. Nixie Monster Dog says, got it. Doe, Uncle go on, says, if you could either. SA 404, Monster Dog says, dot, exclamation point, update color, code. Football inner Uncle go on, says, evolve, Indigo, I read no glory. Doe says, skip, build a multi-form Pokemon or talk to me when you get to one. Doe says, I'd appreciate it. Roman Monster Dog says, exclamation point FC. Roman says, exclamation point FC. Chad Bob says, Brody, owner, John Lovett size. Matt Uncle go on, says, question by football. Echoes and watching Father Tech. Anna says, Father Tech owns. Birthday, Python Dungeon 5%. Nixie Monster Dog says, exclamation point update white, 0561,226 1,531. Chad Bob says, see. Silhouette says, Uncle Protect, Zillow 83 to the bettering person than in those screenshots. Silhouette says, it looks like they just used the original M64 ones. Roman says, yeah. Roman says, well, more of a port. Roman says, with a graphical facelift. Football go on, says, I can't understand the word of those ridiculous accents, but the colors are giddy. Virginia says, Roman Monster Dog says, rather than drink them rating. Uncle go on, says, football. Silhouette Monster Dog says, yeah, but it's not hard to use higher res textures. I'm sure Nintendo has them on an old HD somewhere. But Bob says, yeah, but it's not hard to use better res textures. I'm sure Nintendo has them on an old HD somewhere. Dark Stare by Dungeon Fighter says, Sony, ARC, and TT.L party composed entirely of 009 engines. Roman Monster Dog says, I am sure they do, but it's Nintendo and that would be asking too much of them. Football Minute on Go On says, great. Has joined channel Let's Play. Football Minute on Go On says, I'm watching Father Tech. Silhouette Monster Dog says, this is true. Football Minute on Go On says, Roman Monster Dog says, I love Nintendo but they are lovely. Silhouette says, yeah. SA 404 says, hopefully it's still as bugged. Roman says, they probably still think the online gaming is bad. SA 404 says, Infinite Scotella's boomerang victory, etc. Roman says, hopefully there is anything hidden in the game like the original M64 release. Sheva on Dungeon Fighter says, couch. Sheva says, wait, the Michael Jackson Hell Party is in DFO. Arsen Wolf says, no. Arsen Wolf says, also. TV says, it wasn't Michael Jackson. Arsen Wolf says, behold. TV says, just 009. Arsen Wolf says, Berserker. TV says, 10 of them. Arsen Wolf says, in second impact. Warble Monster Dog says, do the 3DS cards hold more info than N64 cards? Arsen Wolf on Dungeon Fighter says, with epic 50 SS. Arsen Wolf says, http://www.youtube.com/watch?mark equals LGPTI. Roman Monster Dog says, up. Skybob on Dungeon Fighter says, Arsen Wolf, Death/DF Berserker, link to M16S, rated 5.00/5.09, 1,310 views. Cal 2014 on January 19, 2011. Silhouette Monster Dog says, Roman says, they hold as much as a GameCube disc. Roman says, probably more actually. Warble says, alright, good. Roman says, Warble, let's put it this way. Roman says, they were able to port Super Street Fighter 4. Silhouette says, DS cards come in sizes up to a GB. Roman says, to the DS. Roman says, with no toning down. Roman says, anything cheap. Roman says, it's basically a portable UI. Silhouette says, 3DS cards hold up to 4 GB. Roman says, 8 GB. TV on Dungeon Fighter says, holy shit, electric heavy. Roman Monster Dog says, actually. Silhouette says, see it? SA 404 says, okay, a humble reading question from a newbie. Silhouette says, but yeah, portable UI. TV on Dungeon Fighter says, can't wait to fight that one. Silhouette Monster Dog says, with good games. SA 404 says, one ability is random and not determined by the parents, right? Apart from Dream World abilities, of course. SA 404 says, 2 IDs are completely determined by the parents, right? No Game Miracle 31 from 2 shift parents? Roman says, as far as we know, yes. Roman says, as far as we know, yes. SA 404 says, just wondering how hard it'd be to get a decent break card from a single egg donation black. Roman says, there might be a new thing with abilities maybe /W that we haven't discovered yet. Essay 404 says, thanks. Rowan says, kinda like how Riverstones pass on nature. That uncle go on says, Paul Barron. The Constable says, what did they change it or something? It used to be only half the IDs were from the parents. Rowan says, they're still being determined from the parents. He says, I've been reading regularies, but it's a pain in the ass because you can only do it with the dose. Rowan says, directly the IDs are affected, but you're not going to get 31S if the parents don't. He says, and I don't have any good traded dittos. He says, only my own dittos.
You must be the one Dr. Mitchell was patching up.
Essay
I've got
404 says,
if you're
I'm
hurting
not
for...
giving a fuck about IDs anyway, so that's okay?
It's all about quantity.
Pass on the ID of a particular staff by a particular parent by using
The leader was a New Vegas type. Great con.
Rowan said, I don't like the decision to make man buzz.
Weapon mods are things like silencers, scopes, bigger magazines. Special ammo includes things like armor-piercing bullets.
I don't get an answer from that.
Can
Rowan
do.
said, you might? Rowan said, it's a good idea to experiment with. Deploy to split IRC. This machine has fallen asleep. Below has joined channels with Rod. Matthews has quit IRC. Time out. Rowan said, the basic parent has enough impact on the baby's eyes that they are basically determined from the parent. Rocket Hunt finally has quit IRC. The third vote can be used by below. Rowan said, IDs are stupid anyway, you should just believe in your hopes. Says, can you be any more specific than just basically? Rowan said, not really because it isn't that specific. Rowan said, there's a lot of variables. Says, I want to know if anything changed from the old method. Rowan said, like belts and stuff. Rowan said, basically the old method is still the same. Rowan said, just more variables exist now depending on held items and such. Our simple fun dungeon fighter says, even more amusing is the fact I think that's before the patch. Rowan on the says, I wonder if we will pull Amon pass on IDs differently. Rowan says, that would be an experiment to try. Bonita has quit IRC, connection timed out. Says, okay, so it's still half and stuff we use. Our simple fun dungeon fighter says, because his extreme overkill isn't causing that nasty as hell needed game after that patch. Tufile on Let's Win says, ha 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 ha. Tufile says, yes it's. Rowan on the says, yeah. Tufile on Let's Win says, my OCD is nearly satisfied. Tufile says, http://id/577,664,839,851,306,292. Regular says, help me my job is to be satisfied. Regular says, Steam community, Tufile, screenshots. Sephiron says, photograph that file. Sephiron says, I did my Tufile. Rowan on the dog says, so. Rowan says, Nintendo has said. Marcella says, odd man. Marcella says, new Europeans with your earlier release. Rowan says, there will never be a Light or XL or any modified release of the 3DS. Tufile on Let's Win says, each of those places has over 100 collectible items / sabotage targets. Rowan on the dog says, you believe them or call bullshit. Marcella says, bullshit. But Bob says, bull butt. Rowan says, yeah, that's what I am thinking. Toad says, I believe it. Rowan says, they said the same thing about the original DS. Toad says, Eagle instead. Toad says, beginning was. Rowan says, they said any modification to the system. Marcella says, 3DS becomes 3D with 3 dual screens. Rowan says, yes. Rowan says, it will have a back screen. Rowan says, soldiers can see what you're hearing from you. Toad says, they'll upgrade it to 4D. Rowan says, it will also accept cash for payments on PC games. Toad says, so it'll have a clock always on. Marcella says, what do you mean? Marcella says, it also prints money. Marcella says, but only if you work for Nintendo. Rowan says, what about my uncle? Giant Boy Detective has joined channels with Dog. Gummy Joe on Let's Win says, wasting away again in honor still. Marcella on the Dog says, he doesn't need money. Rowan says, but... Nicola on Let's Win says, I couldn't even deal with Just Cause 2 because of my OCD video games. Marcella on the Dog says, he already has a 5 year.
Another satisfied
Rowan says,
customer.
clever dot. Marcella says, why would he be playing shit at 3DS? Gummy Joe on Let's Win says, yeah, it took a lot for me to be like, I don't need to get 100% in Just Cause 2. Gummy Joe says, a lot of willpower. Rowan on the Dog says, no. Rowan says, the one thing. Rowan says, I really didn't like Mario 64 DS. Rowan says, they got rid of that but awesome soundtrack. Rowan says, for selecting your file. Wardle says, my uncle totally did a testing a month break and he gave me new food, but you can't see because I lent it to a friend. Giant boy detective says, what phrase and words should I set my drink hiding card to say? Rhodey says, prepare more cold. Marcella says, what words do you have access to? Wardle says, hey up bitch. Nicholas on Let's Win says, it was a fun game but trying to fight the urge to 100% destroy everything I passed was impossible. Marcella on Smidog says, oh, you can actually type stuff. Wardle says, I hope so. Giant boy detective says, well, no. Marcella says, odd bits. Rhodey says, Wardle says, that system is really stupid. Giant boy detective says, just the standard stuff that was in HD/SSD/T/T. Marcella says, you guys got my hopes up. KFC Infamous Full on Pogo on says, http://i.hindcore.com/u50.if. Why did I laugh at this? I am a bad person. Rhodey on Smidog says, so what is Hanzage making? Rhodey says, and why is it not printed? KFC Infamous Full on Pogo on says, it's just so blatant. Wardle on Smidog says, I still don't get what that means. Rombo says, look still blue, get what that blue, white tilde. Giant boy detective says, I want to play house with adult. Wardle says, is Hanzage your website? Or on Let's Win says, I had a hard time with Burnout Paradise and it doesn't look nearly as false as that map does. Rhodey on Smidog says, no. Rhodey says, it's the green monkey. Wardle says, or are you talking about the grass monkey? Rhodey says, with the bush on its head. Marcella says, I'll show you my history gift. Giant boy detective says, grass monkey, that funky monkey. Wardle says, okay, so what do you mean by what is it thinking? Marcella says, can you do that? Rhodey says, I don't know. Rhodey says, it's the end of the topic. But Bob says, it's the end of the buttock. Pardon Lola on Let's Win says, where your armor parts, bro. Rhodey on Smidog says, no Hanzage being permitted. KFC Infamous Full on Pogo on says, more importantly, why is this a thing? http://selectwaterballsandwich.tumblr.com. Silhouette on Smidog says, less than Wardle greater than that system is really stupid. Wardle says, oh, so essentially you were asking the same question I was asking. Rhodey says, yeah. SA404 says, actually wait. Silhouette says, my personal reading was pardon of the hostage. Sexual Shaw on Let's Win says, is it literally impossible to get 100% AJC to do to a few collectibles/sabotage is being bugged? No on Smidog says, Rhodey says monkey. SA404 says, do you only get the one element monkey for play buff? Maybe on Pogo on says, you are a loose cannon. SA404 on Smidog says, we're all three just roaming around. Nicholas on Let's Win says, I don't know, I got bored and gave up before I got to that point. Join channel Pogo ons. Silhouette on Smidog says, dude outside the first gym time gives you one. SA404 says, yeah, I know that. Silhouette says, opposite door element. Rhodey on Smidog has changed topic to number sign Smidog, the real Pogo ons. Royal channel comment is dumb. I all read the Red Rules movie and play tournament coming soon. http://missing.com/sign up for the trainer club at Pokemon.com to get ready for the new world. No Hanzage came from it. SA404 says, but what about the other two? She says, KFC Infamous Full on Pogo on says, it is a blog about Tom Selleck with waterfalls and sandwiches. KFC Infamous Full says, 5 pages of it. Rhodey on Smidog says, I am sorry, said Window. KFC Infamous Full on Pogo on says, why is this a thing? Mixy on Smidog says, imitating grass. KFC Infamous Full on Pogo on says, I'm frightened. Romina says, bitches. No on Smidog says, it says when it. SA404 says, good. Pokeball Minute on Pogo on says, I know / I am / aroused. Rhodey on Smidog says, it is shaking grass, national death's only thing. Rhodey says, for what? Marcella says, head. Romina on Pogo on says, Pogo. Pokeball Minute says, Sarah. Romina says, Marcella on Smidog says, I don't think it's national deaths. Goldsman says, no. Silhouette on the dog has changed topic to number signs the dog. I all read the red rules food. That tournament coming soon. http:// missing no.hawkremix.org / sign up for the trainer club at Pokemon.com to get ready for the green world. No ending being permitted. Pokeball Impurity on Pokemon says, I was at work and out with my father. Pokeball Impurity says, but not in that order. Pixels the Monster Dog says, it's a lot of different things. Pixel says, you can know the way before you need more. SA404 says, it's all the time. Joe Hollywood says, I think it is in fact impossible, yeah. Joe says, some bug. Pixels the Monster Dog says, only in grass. KFC in the school on Pokemon says, less than plus Pokemon Impurity greater than I would work out with my father. Says, there's also dirt shaking. Pixels says, contrary to the name. Pixels says, cakes do it. Pixels says, so dish water. Rony says, audio gives out to the large extra. Rony says, right? Pixels says, yeah. Giant boy detective says, I was confident that I bear a lot too. Selena on Pokemon says, less than KFC in the school greater than I was making out to Tom Sullivan. Sullivan's dog says, punch it. Sullivan says, that's not good. Sullivan says, where's the window? KFC in the school on Pokemon says, his mustache is so heavenly. Rony on the dog says, guys. Rony says, I just realized something. Rony says, that makes me feel so fucking old. Rony says, Super Mario 64. Pokemon Impurity on Pokemon says, I was not working out with my father. Tyrone says, Papa, I am such a badass. Rony on Pokemon says, he's gonna be 15 years old this year. Matt on Pokemon says, less than KFC in the school greater than I love his less than 3. Gummy Joe on Let's Play says, I mean, H, no, it's not impossible, keep trying to file. Sullivan on Pokemon says, Pokemon is 15 years old. Tyrone on Pokemon says, Dick. Rony on Pokemon says, in Japan. Pokemon Impurity on Pokemon says, Tom Selleck. Renata says, Cashew Bowls, Dick. Sullivan on Pokemon says, how old is SM64 in Japan? Rony says, 15 in April. Sullivan says, it's okay. Sullivan says, you could be older. Pokemon Impurity on Pokemon says, oh yeah, also met my stepsister for the second time ever. Rony on Pokemon says, dude, the Super Nintendo is less than 20. Selena on Pokemon says, now from KFC, the Cash Bowl, available for only 99 cents. Cottage says, TTT in the bathroom gonna avoid all the plungers. Cottage says, Cash Shape 2009. First Aid Hi-Fi Dungeon Fighter says, Sheva, you still want in? If so, got Sky? Matt on Pokemon says, hey. Rony on Pokemon says, there are going to be kids old enough to drink in America. Tyrone on Pokemon says, hey. Someone on Pokemon says, are you older than a Super Nintendo? Rony says, you have never played in Essence. Rony says, yes. Someone says, oh. But Bob says, but. Shababon Dungeon Fighter says, nope. Someone on Pokemon says, but. Rony says, I remember lining up to get the Essence on launch date.
Let me see what you got.
Shababon Dungeon Fighter
Yeah,
says,
this'll do just
I'll
fine.
I don't have
Just
time.
fine. Alright now, we're gonna be making something folks on the trail call healing powder. Go on over to that campfire now. Give it a try.
H. Rony on Pokemon says, and my mom paying $75 for pilot beans. Maiden on Pokemon washes her teeth with a bottle of rum.
That's not bad, see? All it takes to make a recipe is the right ingredients and the right know-how. Sometimes it won't be a campfire you need. You might need to do some work on your guns and ammo, maybe. Important thing to get is it's all the same idea. You just need to find the right place to set up shop. A workbench or a reloading bench, whatever. Well, I hope that's enough to get you started. I'm heading back now. Hope I didn't miss anything good on the jukebox. Cheyenne would never forgive me. Hey, do me a favor. Trudy, she's the bartender up at the Prospector. Kind of the town mom. She likes to meet newcomers. She'd be cross with me if I didn't ask you to poke your head in and say hi. Hi there. Sticking around Good Springs for a while longer?
Silhouette on the dog says,
Sure can.
first day.
Take the road southeast out of town till it hits the freeway. Prim is a town with a roller coaster straight south. Can't miss it. NCR patrols do a good job of keeping the highway clear. But I'd keep your gun where you can reach it easily.
Nobody actually sold it.
You never know who you'll run into. Off the road, you'll probably start running into hostile wildlife. My advice would be to stick to the highway when you can.
Rum would probably kill bacteria like its mouthwash does.
Not in Good Springs, no.
Says,
But if you're up for a little scavenging, there's always the schoolhouse. Most of what's in there is junk, but there's this old safe that even Easy Pete wasn't able to crack with dynamite. If you want to take a shot at it, take it easy.
Dungeon Fighter says, I'll meet you at the top entrance. My insult's name is Leader.
Oh,
Pike says,
well, go ahead and keep the stuff I gave you anyway.
They tried.
It'll be more useful to you than me.
Sella says, $90 for chrono triggered. Rowan said, with fake reviews saying how much the game sucked.
Geckos mostly. The meat's pretty good and I can always find a buyer for the hides. I also help keep the town clear of rat scorpions and coyotes. Not many people live in Good Springs, so wildlife is always creeping in.
Go on, says, actually, so would Jack.
Until next time.
Rowan said, those were fake. Go on, says, I have never once woken up in the morning feeling like P. Actually, I ate JVD, swish vodka around to kill morning breath. Silhouette on the dog says, no. Rowan says, me and Game Pro both gave it high ratings. Lamina on Go on, says, but then fostered sugar environment for it, up into hot roaches, the return. Rowan on the dog says, strangely Nintendo Power didn't even review it. Sella says, why would they try using fake reviews? Maiden on Go on says, the thing is, both are going to make your breath smell of booze and get you slightly intoxicated.
Hello? Can you help me? My girl is trapped by geckos on the ridge, and I can't get to her. Please, she's going to die.
Across the board.
Go up the path, past the broken radio tower, and go to the right. They're at the top of the trail. You will? Thank you for helping me. Please hurry.
Still have the issue. Sella says, whoever on the marketing board decided it should have been fired. Rowan said, was it? Rowan said, I thought Game Pro gave it a 5. Silhouette says, nope. Maiden on Go on says, or really intoxicated if you're using the whole bottle. Emma on the dog says, Brickbound sells for a shitload now. Kishable on Go on says, Maiden, I watched at a convention. I'm okay with that. Rowan on the dog says, yeah. Silhouette says, yeah. Emma says, I keep toying with the idea of selling mine. Sella says, yeah. But Bob says, but. Rowan says, who is it sold for ship? Shababon Dungeon Fighter says, and your character's name is Matthew to join channel Let's Play. Rowan on the dog says, so very few people have it. Silhouette says, part only goes for like $19 plus. Sella says, everyone realized it wasn't bad. Emma says, mind you just toying with it. Tyrone on Go on says, wait to start morning. Tyrone says, ha ha. Emma on the dog says, yeah, I have the car. Kip Harbier on Dungeon Fighter says, hi, what level are you going to get to tonight? Rowan on the dog says, I have never been Earthbound. Silhouette says, I fucking paid $5 for it brand new on clearance at Walmart. Emma says, I also have a first print run of FF7 ball. Sella says, $5. Sella says, ha ha. Emma says, with the printing error on the back. Sella says, Jesus. Rowan says, beat it. Silhouette says, beat it. Rowan says, but FF7 sold huge. Kip Harbier by Dungeon Fighter says, I'm down to root tomorrow unless you get too far. Silhouette on the dog says, I have 2 FF7 CD cases for some reason. Rowan says, it's only worth so much because it's popular. Emma says, first print one is collectors. Rowan says, I have a Volt 64. Rowan says, gold heart. Silhouette says, but my single copy of the game is GH. Silhouette says, with the silver discs. Rowan says, we're gonna vomit blood. Sella says, all I have is a Sega Genesis. Rowan says, and there was nothing at Champion's Fire Temple. Kishable on Go on says, you did see how I found my friend, right, Maiden? Rowan on the dog says, dead serious? Maiden on Go on says, no. Silhouette on the dog says, that wasn't removed until the one dog to level 80. Rowan says, yeah. You can join channel Dungeon Fighter. Silhouette on the dog says, I have 1.1 on a gray cart. Mitsella says, I wouldn't pay attention to the differences anyhow. SA404 says, hell yeah, gold cart. Silhouette says, the only changes between 1.0 and 1.1 were some bug fixes. Fishbowl on go on says, okay, to let you know the drinking we did. SA404 on the dog says, gold cart, follow covered on meters, gold disc for wine waiver. Fishbowl on go on says, http://hphotos.alaska.mpcbn.net/hphotos Alaska is 96/181,993 150,150,107,922,893,158 675,288,157 6,318,435 7,176,087 Road says, 5. Road says, go on, says, I found my email like this. Road says, all the discs for WW. Road says, we're gold. Silhouette says, every wine waiver disc is gold. Silhouette says, SA404 says, I don't know if I got it A1. SA404 says, and never looked back. Road says, the cover was gold on the original printings. Fishbowl on go on says, the entire weekend was a maze, no sleep, and lots of alcohol. Road on the dog says, and after that they used a generic cover. Tupile on what's what it says, less than half dummy joke greater than I mean, H. No, it's not impossible, keep trying Tupile, less than, won't stop me. Silhouette on the dog says, I should mask off the labels on my GDC Zelda cards and spray them gold. Regular on what's what it says, what does that mean, H. No. Maybe on go on says, all. Road on the dog says, yes. Road says, actually, no. Road says, they don't take place in Harlow. Silhouette says, I wish I had a gray card next to Zelda 1. Road says, my Zelda 2 card. Road says, it was clear. Road says, it wasn't gold. Road says, but like. Silhouette says, it's one of the rubber mass releases. Road says, they killed the cover. Silhouette says, what? Road says, I don't know if it was just for aging. Silhouette says, I don't know if Zelda was re-released in gold. Road says, it was. Go on says, wow. SA404 on the dog says, maybe worse. Silhouette says, Silhouette says, great. Road says, oh. SA404 says, it could have gold plastic zone. Romina on go on says, I'll show you having a blast chapter 1. Road on the dog says, I need these. Road says, Zelda sold poorly. Farfig says, it was a pint of silver gold. Silhouette says, 404 cards are black and straight gold. Farfig says, less yellow than Zelda 1. Road says, I am surprised LCD was never gold. Road says, yet Street Fighter should have a green card. Silhouette says, what? That on go on says, chapter 1, BBC. Marty says, all. Road says, Romina on go on says, the only way that can be more interesting a better time had it if there was a girl showered in similar states. Bobby on the dog says, it was re-released as a yellow gold one, wasn't it? Road says, mind it. Rocket Hunt Pilot has joined channel the dog. Road says, Street Fighter 2. Silhouette says, sounds like something like me. Road says, vanilla. Road says, nope. Road says, bought it at Babbage's. Silhouette says, weird. Road says, SA404 says, the ship knocks out a bomb. Giant Boy Detective says, okay, I made up the lack of a new dope in a trainer message by making the trainer signature be a move for weaknesses and handlers. Wardle says, shame that the era of uniquely colored parts is over. Road says, it might be worth something. Road says, I need to go look it up. Says, yeah, probably. SA404 says, I like between the teaching videos from the math re-teaching. Check this out. Road says, ask around some forums. Road says, maybe it was a custom release. Silhouette says, who knows? Silhouette says, Google the shit son. Fargate says, anyone remember Master Chu, the drunkard who? It has this gorgeous china blue heart. Not licensed, of course. Roni says, I know New York City got a lot of exclusive shit. Kishbol on Pogoan says, we drank, looked. All dance attack Sun Dungeon Fighter says, God. Silhouette on Smogog says, Master Chu was the most playable of Color Dreams games. All dance attack Sun Dungeon Fighter says, Syrian. Silhouette on Smogog says, and that's not saying much. Sir. Sun Dungeon Fighter says, save me from the PC screen. SA 404 on Smogog says, man. Silhouette says, I own Black Heart release of Bible Adventures. SA 404 says, I just remembered the SS Woman game. All dance back Sun Dungeon Fighter says, it's the worst one yet. Kishbol on Pogoan prints 2 candles of whipped cream vodka, a bottle of 99 bananas, 2 6-packs of beer, and some other vodka that I don't know where we got it from over a day or so. SA 404 on Smogog says, or should I say Mr. Coleman with Kid and Dr. Yank? Roni says, wow. Roni says, I cannot find nothing. Roni says, I'm Google. Roni on Smogog says, this is a little fucking weird. SA 404 says, speaking of which, Wardle says, the WBC looks pretty bad. Too bad I never got to see it. SA 404 says, Roman was probably the single biggest emphasis for him I actually own. Fargate says, that's the game where you can immediately toss baby Moses into the river. This doesn't make you lose, that's just a good ending, really. First aid, type on Dungeon Fighter. A note, hopefully 33. Deborah Pilots was said, I woke up with 2 birds. Rome on go on says, how is the whipped cream vodka? Fargate on Smogog says, it's SA 404 says, my friend and was laughing his ass off at the impact scene. Kishbol on Pogoan says, incredible. SA 404 on Smogog says, http://www.youtube.com/watch?BD=TRJ7XBNB3IC. Maiden on Pogoan says, what the hell is whipped cream vodka? Romina says, wait a fucking minute, the President of the United States of America. Kishbol says, oh, you had the vodka whipped cream too? Forgot about that, though there isn't that much alcohol in it. SA 404 on Smogog says, his first exposure to the world interview. Kishbol on Pogoan says, Maiden, it's vodka, that tastes like whipped cream. Maiden says, oh. Roni on Smogog says, well, I actually. Roni says, never saw an outcome. Roni says, my dad. Maiden on Pogoan says, that sounds. Roni on Smogog says, we took the train. Maiden on Pogoan says, yeah, that sounds. Roni on Smogog says, which on roads in the WBC? Kishbol on Pogoan says, mix it with orange juice, enjoy your alcohol, leaving cream physical. Roni says, British. Fargate on Smogog says, best of all team. I heard 209 from Diamond Flash Roll. Roni says, champion team. Roni on Pogoan says, oh gosh, awesome. Roni on Smogog says, red and blue. Roni on Pogoan says, must try. Martin Pola has joined channel Let's Play. Chips has joined channel Tap. Maiden on Pogoan says, yeah, okay, that mixed drink sounds good. Kishbol says, we were doing orange juice, orange soda when we ran out with cream vodka, and topping with vodka whipped cream. DJC on Dungeon Fighter says, anyone beat me, I can afford. Lima on Pogoan says, I have never tried this. Lima says, all my hard liquor is heavy. Maiden says, you should. Martin Pola has quit IRC, McServe Low Command used by Martin Pola. Kishbol says, which is a totally different thing. It is vodka infused whipped cream. Comes in the normal tin, squirts out, amazing. Virus one has joined channel Let's Play. Rome on Pogoan says, wait, so there is whipped cream vodka and vodka whipped cream. Kishbol says, Lima, I only drink a couple of liters each, not many. Wicked has joined channel Dungeon Fighter. Shown her on Let's Play odds on Pola. Kishbol on Pogoan says, Tyrone, yes. Maiden says, get some vodka. Yarko has joined channel himself. Tyrone on Pogoan says, shit I'm low. Karados on has joined channel Let's Play. Lima on Pogoan says, everyone gets all rum and coke. Banana says, oh, snip right away, why slash me? In on Snoog says, Rival me, red flash blue. Casual on Poke Go On says, Lima, gin and scotch are the only things I will drink straight. Lima says, I have my Sailor Cherry by itself. Jazz Servo has joined channel Poke Go Ons. Maiden says, like 2 parts vodka,